Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is sent back to his 5-year-old body part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Uzumaki Naruto. The man revered as the 7th Hokage and the son of the legendary Yellow Flash, Namikaze Minato, the 4th Hokage. The man who was arguably the strongest ninja of his time. His reign as Hokage continued on for more than a decade. He had nearly no regrets and planned to continue his duty for many more years to come. A splendid morning one day in the beautiful village of Konohagakure no Sato, the sun was now slowly rising past the Hokage monument, a giant cliff face with the faces of the previous Hokage sculpted into it. Morning dew was sparkling on the leaves of the village. People were slowly beginning their daily duties and opening their stores and stalls. In a room in a certain building, a blonde-haired boy groaned in his sleep. He rolled to the side and promptly fell off the side of the bed and landed face down. The boy got up, rubbing his face and brushing the dust off from his white t-shirt and black shorts, his eyes half closed and yawned. He then looked around while stretching his arms and immediately froze in place. What kind of bad dream is this? Is the first thought that crossed his mind upon seeing the dirty and small bedroom he was in. What's going on here? Why am I here? And why do I feel so miserable? Then all of a sudden, a kind of opening appeared in the air in his room and a beautiful woman stepped out of it. The woman had pure fair skin which appeared to be shining lightly. She was wearing a kind of white battle kimono with tiny symbols and bigger floral patterns all over it. The symbols were basically small kanji of the 5 elements in their respective color. Her sleeves were parted at the shoulder to show some of the upper part of the arms but were attached to the dress below the armpits. The lower half of the dress ended right around the knees, leaving the lower half of her legs exposed. She was wearing a pair of low-heeled jeta as well. The woman was roughly 5 foot 6 inches tall and had beautiful long violet hair. The hair was straight and shining and reached near to the back of her thighs. She had the perfect body shape along with around C-sized assets which seemed to fit her body perfectly. Though in actuality, this could only be seen lightly as she was draped in her white dress. Her face was by far the most beautiful ever seen and had a divine smile. Her eyes each had a golden iris with black pupils and seemed very knowledgeable but with a hint of mischief. From all perspectives, one can easily consider her a goddess. "Good morning, Uzumaki Naruto-kun," she said to the boy in a clear, melodious and divine voice. Naruto stared wide-eyed at the new figure in his room and his face turned lightly red. He snapped himself out of his trance and turned to her. "Good morning. Who are you?" he asked her. I can't exactly be surprised if she turned out to be a goddess from that entry and her looks. She smiled wider, mischief evident on her face. "Now me? I'm Kami-chan. Nice to meet you," she told the boy, expecting him to gape and be surprised. To her own surprise, the boy just stood there with a blank expression. Yeah, not exactly the reaction she hoped for. I was right. Well, that was pretty awkward. Naruto thought to himself. Okay, Kami-chan, why am I here in the apartment I used to live in when I was a kid and why do I look like a brat? I don't remember using any kind of transformation last time I was awake. Because I sent you back in time. You are now in your 5-year-old body. She replied, hoping to surprise him this time. She was once again let down when he just stared at her with a hint of annoyance in his face. Oh come on. Why is his mental fortitude and adaptability so damn strong? She thought to herself and began crying inwardly but still had the same divine smile outwardly. Alright. So according to you, I'm back to my 5-year-old body and am now in my childhood days again. Why exactly is that so? Naruto asked her neutrally. The goddess cleared her throat and started. You see, Naruto-kun, the past 10 years and more were too boring for me to even watch over and was devoid of any excitement. So I brought you back to the past so you can go on adventures again, fight bad guys and stuff while I watch you from my special VIP seat and eat popcorn. She finished with a mischievous smile. To say that Naruto was annoyed right now would be an understatement. So you're telling me you messed up my future peaceful life and the timeline to have some fun? He asked to confirm. The goddess nodded to him sweetly. What the hell? Was his first reaction to the ridiculousness. He shook his head and looked back at her. Then tell me, why do I feel like a miserable loser right now? Oh, that's because I sent only your and one other person's memories and knowledge back to the past. I didn't send your feelings and emotions with them. I'm sure you remember, but when you were 5 years old, you felt lonely and sad every day because of those villagers ignoring your existence. She said without flinching, her smile low. But of course, now that you received your memories, you can feel good like always again. I've also enchanted your young brain to be able to handle the influx of memories. Naruto sighed and scratched his head. Fine. I get it. Wait, who's the other person? Who was the person that stayed with you your entire life from your day of birth and up to the latest day? Naruto breathed out and smiled. Kurama. Bingo. I'm glad you're quick, Naruto-kun. she said, clasping her hands in front of herself. Naruto sighed again and looked at her. Fine. But what exactly do you want me to do, Kami-chan? Oh, I don't know. Something interesting but different from your past life. Something like beating the daylights out of a strong enemy when you're still a kid, or saving a damsel in distress, or making a harem. She replied without even a twitch. Naruto frowned thoughtfully. Wait, a harem? Why would I want something like that? I have Hinata already. I told you, didn't I? You don't have your previous emotions at the moment. If you want, try thinking of her right now. Naruto raised an eyebrow and thought of his wife, or his now ex-wife, or was it future wife? He replayed some of his memories with her and noticed something about himself. He felt like he was just watching some kind of movie and couldn't exactly get any feeling for them. Naruto frowned at this and turned at the goddess. See? Anyway, for now I'll also make sure she doesn't fall in love with you again at first sight anyways. Maybe after some time. I'll also make it so that you won't either. It would be a little too canon for my liking otherwise. So for a while, you're just gonna be friends. Hananya. What a great word to use for my life story. Naruto thought in deadpan. Still he glared heatedly at the woman, who gave a surprised flinch. She then tilted her head in confusion. What is the matter? What is the matter? He repeated in an angry, questioning tone. The matter is that I don't appreciate people tuning my head without my permission. I loved Hinata and had 2 children, both of them whom I loved dearly. So I'm not exactly happy that I don't feel anything for them anymore. The fact that I can't see them again is another reason to not be happy. He spoke with his glare still in place. The divine being shrank into herself, but she straightened herself just as quickly and kept her face blank. She then surprised Naruto by bowing to him deeply, her silky violet tresses sliding down her sides as she did so. I apologize, Naruto-kun. It's just that there are some circumstances. Please be understanding. Naruto stared at the goddess, bowing to him with a frown on his face. He kept his eyes on her form for a few more seconds before letting out a loud exhale and shaking his head. He ran his hand through his blonde locks before removing the hand and looking at it. My hair hasn't been this rough for a long time. His eyes went back to the still bowed form of the goddess and groaned. Naruto himself knew that he was weak to this kind of thing, being the soft-hearted guy he is. He walked up to the woman and gently placed his hands on her shoulders. He made a lifting motion which she followed up on and stood up straight, her face set in an expression of guilt. He turned away while rubbing the back of his neck. Just forget it. It's okay. The goddess smiled slightly and nodded. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Her solemn mood then vanished in a flash before she perked up again. Now, enough of that stuff. The emotions can come later. I actually want to see you kick some ass in an epic fashion, she said with a tone of slight excitement. Naruto just sighed with a sweat drop behind his head. Fine. I'll become stronger this time and be more awesome than ever. Oh, but do visit me from time to time, Kami-chan. You look like someone I can have a fun time with. The goddess adopted a small teasing smile. Aw, you're so cute, Naruto-kun. Naruto blushed lightly. But actually I don't have to even do that. What? Why? Naruto asked, confused. The goddess just smirked, then bent down and ruffled his hair, to which Naruto blushed again mildly, while keeping his emotions and bodily reactions in check. Because my VIP seat is actually in your own mindscape, right beside the little fox. Naruto looked at her with a bit of excitement. Really? Then that means you're gonna be with me all the time. He then blinked in confusion. Wait, why am I getting excited all of a sudden? Meh, must be the younger body's residue emotions or something. That's right. But before I come and occupy my seat, I have some things to do. So I'll just come to your mind when I'm done. By the way, you can tell others about your situation if you want, but try to keep the group as small as possible. It wouldn't be any fun otherwise. She got up and proceeded to walk near the newly opened warp gate. Well then, I'll see you again later, Naruto-kun. Naruto waved to her lightly. Bye, Kami-chan. See you later. The goddess looked back at him and gave him one last divine smile. I hope he grows fast. He's gonna have such a cool look. And I'm gonna tease him to my heart's content. She giggled perversely in her mind and went into the portal, which closed shortly afterwards. Naruto sighed and sat on his bed. If I wasn't an experienced ninja with a strong mind, I'd probably be jumping all over the place in panic right now. He thought to himself. First, I need to have a talk with him before doing anything else. He nodded to himself and sat in a lotus position on the bed and delved into himself. Naruto entered his mindscape and looked around. The place had changed in the years by a large margin. It was still a sewer, but it wasn't as dirty as before. Now, it looked like a newly built tunnel devoid of the water that flooded it once. It was also a tad bit brighter than before. Naruto was about to call out to his tenant when suddenly he caught sight of a giant gate between him and his sleeping tenant, which had a paper in the center with the kanji for seal. Right. I forgot. The seal wasn't open back then. He thought. Naruto held his chin in his hand, frowned thoughtfully and then nodded to himself. Naruto jumped up and ripped off the seal paper. He then landed, pulled up his shirt and readied his right hand, which held a blue chakra flame on each finger. His entire hand was covered in writing which collectively seemed to have the general shape of a key. He immediately put his fingers on the seal on his stomach and unlocked it. After a brief moment, the gate also swung open and vanished. Good thing I knew the structure of the seal and the key too. It would have been pretty annoying if I had to go to the toad's home to get the key again. The giant orange-furred fox now woke up and yawned loudly. He stretched and then caught sight of the blonde. Yo, Naruto. What's going on? The fox stopped, blinked a few times and rubbed his eyes. He then stared at the blonde again. He then immediately fell on the floor, clutching his orange sides and laughing loudly. Naruto's eyebrow twitched in annoyance at the sight. Ahahaha. What happened to you, kid? Why do you look so tiny again? Kurama asked him, calming down his laughter. Yeah. Just laugh at my misery, Kurama. Now listen. Naruto sighed and began explaining the situation to his tenant. A brief explanation later, Kurama looked at the blonde and blinked. What the hell? Exactly my first reaction as well. So? What do we do? What do you mean what to do, brat? We just become strong and make you Hokage again or something even better. Anything's better than the paperwork maniac you became in your previous life. I was getting bored of all those years with nothing to do anyway. At least now, things will be a little more exciting. Kurama replied with a smirk. Naruto smirked back to him. Well, I'm happy both of us are hot-headed. He said, but then frowned. But hey, what do we do about the yin half of your chakra? Dad has it, right? And he's gone. The only way to get it back would be that method. You don't have to worry about that, Naruto-kun. A melodious voice replied from behind him. Naruto turned back, and both him and Kurama looked at the beautiful violet-haired woman walking towards them. Naruto grinned at her. So you're done with your things, Kami-chan. The goddess smiled back at him. Yes, Naruto-kun. Now I'm ready to spend my time here. See, I even brought the popcorn. She said holding up a few buckets of popcorn. Naruto and Kurama both sweat dropped. I didn't think you were serious about that. Anyway, what do you mean we don't have to worry about my chakra? Kurama asked the woman. The violet-haired goddess looked at Kurama. That's because I transferred the chakra Minato-kun took from you into Naruto-kun's body after I sent you back. The blonde and the fox blinked at her reply. Why? Why? They inquired in perfect unison. The goddess just shrugged nonchalantly. Meh, it's too much work for anyone to take it back from a dead person. You also may be forced to kill someone for that if you know what I'm talking about. The two narrowed their eyes in response. They knew exactly what she was talking about. It's how the Fourth Shinobi World War even became as chaotic as it had become due to the appearance of certain people. A lot of certain people. Anyway, try checking yourself, Kurama-chan. She said, snapping the two from their thoughts as the fox raised his non-existent eyebrow. Chan. It wasn't every day that someone addressed a being capable of destroying mountains and creating tsunamis with such unfriendly suffix. Naruto looked at the fox who observed his own self, then turned and nodded to Naruto. Naruto turned back to the goddess and bowed to her lightly. Thank you, Kami-chan. The beautiful woman shook her head. Don't mind it, Naruto-kun. By the way, is it alright if I redesign this place? She asked him, gesturing at the giant gloomy sewer they were in. Naruto looked around and shrugged. Sure. Do as you like. The goddess nodded and looked straight ahead. Her eyes began to glow and the entire area they were in began to fade into darkness, then a bright light shined all around them, to which Naruto and Kurama had to cover their eyes with their hand paw. After a few moments, they felt a cool breeze pass them. The two of them opened their eyes and gaped at the sight. They were now in the middle of a large grassy plain, which was surrounded by forests and some mountains on one side, a kind of barren area on another side, a snow-covered landscape and some mountains on another side and lastly a blue sea on the last side. There was also a medium-sized house-like structure near the edge of the forest which Naruto presumed to be for the goddess's use. Heh. Kurama smirked and turned to the goddess. I like you already. Why, thank you, Kurama-chan. She replied. Naruto looked around and then turned back to her and nodded. Yep, you're a goddess alright. The woman just chuckled and took a seat on the grass. Well, what are you going to do now, Naruto-kun? She asked as Kurama sat down shortly afterwards. First, I need to get my feelings in check so I don't freak out and start hugging everybody I know. Then I'll go to Jai-chan's office. Hiro-kun. Why? The goddess asked him. Kurama, in the meanwhile, was getting ready for another nap. Naruto chuckled at her nickname for the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, and then continued. I want to see him again after all these years. I'm also gonna tell him a bit about the situation I'm in and strike a deal with him. A deal? What do you have with you that you can use to bargain with him? The goddess inquired, now curious. Naruto smirked. I'll help him defeat the greatest enemy in his life. The beautiful woman looked at him in confusion and then realized what he was talking about. She giggled with her mouth hidden behind her hand. Naruto got out of his mindscape and prepared to shower. He would then go meet the Hokage. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage. The man known as the god of shinobi and as the professor for knowing more than 1,000 jutsu. One of the longest reigning Hokage in history. That man was now seated behind his desk in his office, glaring fiercely at the stacks of paper in front of him, willing it to burn a hole through itself. Of course, such a thing is not easy to do, if at all possible. He then sighed and took his pipe and lit it. He took a puff and breathed it out. It was at this moment that a familiar blonde-haired boy burst into the office through the door. Hiruzen blinked at the entry and looked to the new arrival. Naruto got up and grinned foxily at the man. "Yo, Jai-chan, grandpa." Once he got a clear look at his surrogate grandfather, his look softened a little and he held back any desires to cry or hug him. The Hokage chuckled at the boy's actions. He never failed to brighten his day. "Good morning, Naruto-kun. What brings you here today?" Naruto took a seat and looked at his surrogate grandfather. "I actually have a very important matter to talk to you about, Jai-chan," he told the man with an expressionless gaze. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at this and the boy's tone, then nodded to continue. Naruto instead shook his head. "Alone," he said with a serious tone and face. Hiruzen raised his other eyebrow. He had never seen his surrogate grandson so serious before now. He assumed that something very important must have happened for him to be acting like this and decided to hear him out. He gestured his Anbu to leave the room, which they did immediately, after which he activated the privacy seals. The room glowed blue for a split second. He then turned back to the boy in front of him. "So, what did you want to talk to me about, Naruto-kun?" he asked the boy with an equally serious tone. Naruto breathed out and scratched the back of his head. "Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but the me from this morning is actually from about 35 years in the future." The third Hokage just blinked at the boy. "What?" Naruto just looked at him. "Yes, I'm serious. I'm from the future." Hiruzen relaxed in his chair. "Well, I must say, Naruto-kun. That's new." He took his pipe and began to take another puff. Naruto's eye twitched. "You read Icha Icha whenever your secretary isn't looking. The same Icha Icha was written by one of your famed students." Said student is a pervert, sorry, a super pervert. Hiruzen immediately coughed violently from choking on his smoke, then looked at the boy in shock. Naruto continued. "Namik is Minato, the fourth Hokage is my father. My mother is Uzumaki Kushina. She was the second Jinchuriki of the Kikbi after Uzumaki Mido. Both my mom and dad died on the day of my birth, trying to protect me. Dad used the 8 trigram seal too." I got it, Naruto-kun. I will believe you." Hiruzen stopped the boy with an exhausted expression. It seemed that he was on the verge of getting a heart attack from all the knowledge. He then calmed down and asked the boy, "So what happened to you in the future?" Naruto grinned and pointing to himself with his thumb, "I became Hokage." Hiruzen smiled at him and nodded. "So why are you back here then?" he asked the boy, feeling awkward that he's talking with someone from the future but looks like someone he met just a couple days ago. Naruto sighed and explained what happened. His encounter with the goddess and what she did, while leaving out the parts concerning Kurama. He did not want to give another heart attack to the old man when he told him that he had opened the seal. Another brief explanation later. The third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, blinked at the blonde boy. "What the hell? Strike 3. Naruto said to himself. The goddess inside him chuckled lightly. "So you're telling me that the goddess is in your mind right now?" Naruto nodded. "Can I meet her?" Hiruzen asked. The goddess's ears perked up and waited for the reply from the blonde. Naruto looked at his surrogate grandfather. "No. You'll die from excessive blood loss from your nose," he replied with a straight face and a serious voice. The goddess fell on the ground laughing. The boy's answer made Hiruzen turn to his imagination and after a second, had a slight nosebleed. He wiped his nose and looked at the boy who was wearing a face that was basically saying, "Are you freaking kidding me?" Hiruzen waved his hand and looked back at the boy. "Well then, why are you telling me all this?" he asked. "It's because I want to make a deal with you, Jai-chan," Naruto replied promptly. "And for my own mental safety." Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at this. "What kind of deal?" "I want you to give me an empty training ground for myself and not allow anyone else access to it. I also want you to listen to my advice regarding certain events." Naruto told him, a little nervous about the last part. The Hokage frowned and thought, "What events are you referring to, Naruto-kun?" "I can't tell you that right now, Jai-chan. But I will tell you before they happen." Hiruzen thought for a moment but nodded. "And what are you offering me from your side, Naruto-kun?" Naruto smirked. "The secret to defeating the greatest enemy of all Kages." Hiruzen looked at the boy curiously while he continued paperwork. The Hokage immediately disappeared from behind the desk and was now holding both of Naruto's shoulders with a desperate look on his face. Naruto's sweat dropped at the desperation his surrogate grandfather was showing with regards to paperwork. "Really, Naruto-kun? You really know the secret to defeating this damned hindrance?" the Hokage shouted, pointing to the stacks of paper on the desk. Naruto smiled nervously and nodded. Why yes I do, Jai-chan. And I can tell you. But only if you agree to the deal. I also don't want you peeping on me through that crystal ball of yours. If you do, I'll jam the vision. I don't mind that, Naruto-kun. I'll give you training ground 42. It has everything you could ever need in it and is away from the crowds as well. And I'll make sure none of my ninja go near there. Just tell me the secret to unlocking my freedom, please. The Hokage pleaded to the boy. The goddess inside the boy was now starting to hurt from laughing non-stop for the previous few minutes. Alright. I'll tell you. Naruto stated. Hiruzen released the boy's shoulders and stood straight, waiting desperately for the key to his freedom. The blonde put up 2 fingers. 2 words. Kage Bunshin, shadow clones. AN. So it's 4 words. Bite me. The third Hokage's eyes widened, but then narrowed. He slowly walked around the desk and sat on his chair. He took a deep breath and exhaled. He moved his pipe to the side and slowly removed his cage hat and placed it to the side of the desk. He then immediately banged his head to the desk. He got up silently and banged again. He continued to bang his head to the desk multiple times while muttering stupid stupid. He then finally sat up straight and put his hat on his head again. What kind of professor am I, damn it, he grumbled, then sighed and took a puff from his pipe. Naruto was watching all this with barely contained laughter and was now trying to calm down. The goddess had passed out from excess laughter and was now laying unconscious on the grass. Kurama, who had woken up to her laughter, was now poking her to see if she was still alive. Hey anyway Jai-chan, do we have a deal? Naruto asked the old Hokage whose face was now slightly red from the banging. Hiruzen sighed and looked at the boy. Yes, Naruto-kun, we do. I thank you for your help as well. Training ground 42 is now yours alone and I will make sure it is ready by today noon. Thanks a lot, Jai-chan. Hey, can you get out of your seat for a moment? Naruto asked as he jumped off his seat and started to walk behind the desk. Hiruzen nodded after a moment and got up from his chair. Immediately, Naruto gave him a warm hug. The older man just looked at the boy who was now holding him like he'd been gone for a long time. It's good to see you again, Jai-chan. He said quietly. Hiruzen though heard it and smiled warmly before returning the hug. Naruto released him and then walked to the door and turned back. Well then, I'll see you later, Jai-chan. Hiruzen nodded with a smile and released the privacy seals. Naruto then walked outside the door while waving back to his surrogate grandfather. Hiruzen waved back to him as he left. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage, sighed and looked to the dreaded paper stacks on his desk. He then formed his hand into the cross seal and 3 shadow clones puffed into existence. They immediately went to work with one on the seat behind the desk and the other 2 on the seats in front of it. The real Hokage went and sat on the couch. He pulled out his orange book and started to read it comfortably. The 3 Anbu that had went outside returned into the room and were promptly surprised but went into positions immediately. The female Anbu among them growled when she saw the Hokage reading the abominable literature. Ah, life's great. Thought Naruto as he walked through the street. He then noticed the glare he was getting from the people all around him. He hadn't noticed this earlier because there weren't as many people on the streets back then. Oh right, there's still this, isn't it? I'd completely forgotten about this. I had gotten used to getting happy nods from people after I defeated Pain, I mean Nagato. Heh. Well ain't this nostalgic? Kurama spoke from inside Naruto's mind. Well, if any of them pick trouble with you this time, they'll get a lot more than they bargained for. Well I'll just knock them unconscious and get away anyway. I don't exactly want to kill every guy that comes across me. Naruto replied mentally to his fox tenant. Whatever. I still think it would be easier to do that than trying your hardest to avoid them. Just let it go, Kurama. They'll understand eventually. You remember that the villagers in the future accepted me and they knew you were helping me too. Fine. Do whatever you want. I'm gonna take another nap. Good night, Fox. Oh wait, looks like there's some guy coming to pick some trouble with me already. Naruto told mentally as he noticed a giant man with a sake bottle in his hands coming towards him. Oh? Well this is gonna be good. I can't wait to see those idiots' faces. Kurama said as he smirked. Naruto then stopped in front of the giant chubby man. The man smirked. Well, if it ain't the demon brat. How about you come with me, huh? I'll give you some candy. He said with a stupid voice. From the bottom of my boot. Naruto smirked with his eyes shadowed and ran from his side, then turned to run into an alleyway. The other villagers watched as the giant drunk followed the boy into the alleyway. The blonde boy was standing near the dead end at the back of the alley. Heh. Your luck's run out, demon. The man spat out as he swung the bottle in his hand towards the boy. Naruto sidestepped the attack and jumped towards the nearby wall of the narrow alley. He springboarded upwards off the wall using chakra on his feet towards the back of the man's head, who was now blinking in confusion at the spot the boy was a second ago. Naruto pumped some chakra into his hand and chopped hard at the back of the man's neck. The man's eyes rolled up and he fell forward, face down on the ground. Naruto landed on the ground and calmly walked out of the alley with his hands in his pockets like a badass, in Naruto's own opinion at least. The people who were watching the encounter at the entrance to the alley stared wide-eyed at the blonde and made way for him. They wouldn't dare go against him when they saw him make quick work of a man bigger than most of them. At least, not now anyway. Naruto looked at everyone's faces as he walked away. He laughed inwardly at their reaction. "How was that, Kurama?" Naruto asked his tenant, smiling. "Ha ha ha ha. That was pretty damn entertaining." The fox replied as he laughed happily in the mindscape. "I must say, Naruto-kun. Now that I read your previous memories and know what you've been through, that was indeed pretty satisfying." The goddess told Naruto with the evergreen smile on her face. "Heh. I always wanted to do that when I was young. Now I feel kind of refreshed." "Indeed. So where to, Naruto-kun?" "Food. The only place I can get it from in this part of my life." "I see. Carry on, then. I will have a short nap." The goddess said as she made herself comfortable on the grass and laid down and instantly drifted into sleep. "Why do the people in my head like to sleep so much?" Naruto thought to himself as he made his way to Ichiraku Ramen. "Yotuchi Ajisan." Naruto greeted, nay, shouted as he entered his favorite childhood and teenage restaurant. Gucci turned back to see the blonde boy. "Yo Naruto. Here for some breakfast, eh? You really gotta eat something else besides ramen too, you know, to balance your diet," he said while grinning at his favorite customer. Naruto grinned back at him as he took a seat. "If I do that, you guys won't get as much business from me as before." "Well, I can believe that. You sometimes eat as much ramen as 4 or 5 people combined." Tucci replied as he turned back to prepare the broth. "So, you having the usual?" "Yep, 3 bowls of miso ramen." Naruto replied as Tucci's daughter came out from the inside and noticed Naruto sitting at the counter. She immediately ran around the counter and hugged him tightly from the side. "Good morning, Am-chan." Naruto managed to greet as he got out of the hug. "Oh you player you," his inner goddess giggled. "Shush, you. Go back to sleep." Okay," she said with a chuckle as she went back to sleep instantly. "Good morning, Naruto-kun. What brings you here today?" Am asked as she let go of the boy and headed back behind the counter. "Breakfast. And then I'm gonna go make some new friends today." Naruto replied excitedly. "New ha?" Gucci and Am shared a worried glance as the girl turned back to the blonde. "Are you gonna be okay?" "Don't worry, Am-chan. I saw some interesting kids yesterday. Today I'm gonna go talk to them," Naruto told the worrying girl. "Yep, yesterday." Am smiled as she exhaled. "Okay, be careful. You never know what they might do to you." Naruto nodded with a smile. "Alright then, here's your first bowl of miso," she said as she placed the bowl in front of him. Naruto took it and separated the chopsticks. "Itadakimasu," he said and gorged into the bowl of ramen. "Yep, definitely my favorite food," he said in between mouthfuls. Tucci and Am chuckled at him as they went back to work. After a few minutes, Naruto finished his meal and put the money on the counter before saying goodbye and rushed out of the restaurant. Am turned to her father. "Hey TM-san, Dad, he feels kind of different, doesn't he?" she asked him. "Yeah, he feels a little different. But he's still the same kid that loves ramen and wants to be Hokage," Tucci said with a grin. Am looked at the exit and smiled. "Yep, that's for sure. No other kid I know can be like him," she muttered as she took the money from the counter and went back to work. Troublesome. Hurry up, Chijai." Sigh. "Oh I give up, Shikamaru. I don't know what to do anymore." The plump boy named Chijai said as he moved away from the Shingai board and opened a pack of chips. "Troublesome boy, you wanna play me, Ino?" The pineapple hair-styled boy named Shikamaru asked looking at the girl standing beside them. "No way. I don't wanna play such a boring game. I can't win anyway." The girl with short platinum blonde hair shouted out. "So I guess I'm doing some cloudjazing today then," Shikamaru said as he relaxed where he was sitting. "Yo." A voice shouted beside them loudly. The 3 of them jumped in surprise, then looked towards the source of the voice. They saw a grinning boy with spiky blonde hair and sparkling blue cerulean eyes, wearing a black t-shirt and orange shorts. "Hey. Don't sneak up on us like that," Ino shouted at the new boy. "That's true. I almost dropped my chips," Chijai said to the blonde. Sorry. "Hey, can I play with you guys?" Naruto asked as he looked towards Shikamaru. "Troublesome, you know how to play Shingai?" The black-haired boy asked the blonde. "Sure I do. I'm the best there is." "How about a match then?" Naruto asked with a foxy grin. "Heh. Why not? Let's see what you can do," Shikamaru said as he replaced the pieces on the board and Naruto helped. He then sat down on the side opposite Shikamaru. "I'll give you the first move," Shikamaru said to the blonde. "Nah, you can have it. I'm still gonna beat you," the blonde replied. Shikamaru smirked and made the first move. Naruto immediately replied with his own. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow and made another move to which Naruto again made his own instantly. After 2 more moves along with Naruto's instant replies, Shikamaru mumbled troublesome and joined the fingertips of both his hands, with his eyes closed. He stayed like this for a while. Naruto was resting his head on his palm with his elbow on his leg and a smile on his face. Shikamaru may be a genius and Naruto's strategist in the future, but right now he was still a 5-year-old kid with a developing brain. He can be considered a genius within his own age group, but when comparing him with a near 40-year-old, who was also the leader of the entire village and one of the strongest ninja in the world, it couldn't exactly be considered a fair match. As soon as Shinji and Ino saw Shikamaru make his so-called thinking pose, Shinji stopped eating, and both of them stared in awe towards Naruto, who was calmly watching Shikamaru think of his next options. Hey Shinji, who is this guy? He made Shikamaru get serious. Ino whispered to Shinji, who was now looking at his best friend. I don't know. I've sometimes seen him around the park, but he's never talked to us until today. Shinji replied back in whisper. As they watched, Shikamaru opened his eyes and made his next move. Naruto looked at the board for half a second before making his own. After 3 more moves and Naruto's seemingly immediate replies, Shikamaru's eye twitched and he again went into his thinking pose. After a while, Shikamaru made his move. This continued on for about 20 minutes. Shikamaru looked at the Shinji board with his eye now twitching violently. He sighed and looked at the blonde who was yawning lightly with hand in front of his mouth. He sighed again. I give. Man, you really are strong. I've never played anyone as strong as you except my dad, and he holds back. Shikamaru told the blonde. The blonde boy smirked at his comment, what makes you think I wasn't? The black-haired boy's eyes widened before he made a smirk. My name's Nara Shikamaru. I'm probably the laziest guy you'll ever meet. Shikamaru introduced himself as he extended his hand over the Shinji board. Naruto grabbed and shook his hand. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the most awesome guy you'll ever meet. He said with a grin, to which Shikamaru snorted in amusement. The other 2 were kids who were watching the game were now gaping in disbelief at the result. They shook themselves out of their shock and looked at the blonde who turned to them. I'm Akamichi Shinji. Shikamaru's my best friend and I like to eat. The plump boy said to the blonde as he began to eat his chips again. The girl was still mesmerized by the blonde's blue eyes when he turned to her. She somehow managed to snap out of her trance and introduced herself to the boy. My name is Yamanaka Ino. I'm the one who keeps these 2 in line. She then bent over and whispered into the boy's ear, by the way, a word of advice. Don't call Shinji fat or he'll go berserk. Naruto just chuckled nervously in response to that bit of knowledge. Naruto then turned to Shikamaru with a smirk. Wanna have another go? Shikamaru grinned in turn and began to replace the pieces again. The 2 of them played 2 more games after that, each longer than the last by a few minutes, but still ended up with Naruto winning. The blonde then got up to play with the other 2, while Shikamaru opted to gaze at the clouds instead. The 3 of them played in the park until a while after noon, after which Naruto decided to go. I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Probably in the afternoon. Naruto told them as he got up to leave. Really? Promise, Ino demanded from him as she stood in front of Naruto. Naruto smiled warmly and nodded. I promise. I'd never lie to you, Ino-chan. Ino smiled widely and nodded before pulling him into a hug. Naruto's face felt somewhat warm at this gesture and was then released from the contact. Naruto shook his head and waved them goodbye before running off. Ino stared at him as he went outside the park. He's a cool guy, isn't he? Shinji asked as he went and sat next to Shikamaru, who was lying down and watching the clouds. Well, he plays Shinji damn good. Shikamaru said to his best friend. Ino muttered, still looking towards the direction the blonde ran off. What's wrong, Ino? The plump boy asked the girl. It's nothing. The platinum blonde-haired girl replied and got back to her friends, still thinking of the boy who just left. Those blue eyes were so pretty. She thought to herself. You sure do know how to leave an impression, Naruto-kun. The goddess spoke from inside Naruto's mind. What do you mean? I mean what you did back there. Huh? What did I do? Kami-chan. So you're telling me you did that without even realizing? Like I keep asking you, what are you even talking about? Nothing. Alright. Whatever. I can't believe it. This guy's a natural. Though it's not exactly shocking either. The goddess thought to herself as Naruto neared training ground 42. He looked to the guard who nodded to the boy. Naruto nodded in reply and went inside. It's for the best if I start training from a young age. My goal for now would be to maybe become a B-rank ninja by the time I graduate from the ninja academy. Better if possible. I'm gonna have to skip lunch today. I need to save up some money to buy some stuff. Naruto thought to himself as he ran to a clearing, after which he stopped. The training ground had most of his needs in it already. There were some big clearings at some spots, while everywhere else was covered with trees, along with a wide and deep stream passing through it. There was also a forest outside the training ground which was teeming with wildlife. Naruto stretched his limbs well and cleared any knots from his neck and fingers. He then stood straight and closed his eyes. He focused on himself and observed his chakra flow. AN. Skip to next note if not interested in explanations. Leads directly to actions. Naruto realized that his chakra coils had shrunken, which meant his chakra reserves were significantly smaller. That was to be expected since he was back in his young body. Continuous usage of chakra would expand the coils, and he'd be in better shape again soon. Next, chakra control. In his past-future body, Naruto had refined his control well enough that he was technically capable of performing very basic Iram ninjutsu, medical ninja techniques, such as a basic diagnosis, which required near-perfect control. That doesn't mean he learned it though, it's just that it was possible in technical terms. And that was when he had giant chakra reserves. Now that he was back in his younger body, he had smaller reserves, and hence his control should be even better. But he still wasn't interested in Iram ninjutsu though. His physical body, on the other hand, was a disaster. Even for a 5-year-old, it was unusually slim, thanks to the lack of fresh food he was able to procure in his childhood. With some good food, he would be able to nourish himself, and he could develop his body by doing exercises. He could use his experience from missions to hunt his own food, and could get some books to learn about herbs and other useful stuff. Naruto opened his eyes and took his taijutsu stance. He went through some katas with his fastest possible speed, while moving and jumping around. He understood that he really needed to develop his speed and agility. It was obvious that his strength needed training as well since, at the moment, he was weaker than the past academy graduated Sakura, who was a fangirl that didn't have any physical prowess whatsoever. That sent shudders down his body, and he understood his own urgency, completely forgetting that he was still a 5-year-old kid. Naruto then took a leaf from the ground and held it between his fingers. He focused intently on it and channeled his chakra through it. The leaf got a small cut at its tip. It was very slightly burned to the side, while the other side had barely become damp. Naruto nodded his head at the result. He could see the signs of his primary element, which was wind, but was quite surprised when he saw the signs of his secondary affinities as well. In his past life, he had mastered all 5 elements, but his lightning and earth masteries were noticeably weaker. His mastery over wind though, was better than the best of the land of wind. But his younger body wasn't at all trained before. As such, he was quite surprised that his secondary affinities were already powerful enough to show signs on a leaf, not even chakra paper. Lastly, he needed to check the speed at which he could train, which really meant how many shadow clones he could create. Since the memory and exercise experience get sent back to the user, it was basically a dream technique to use for training, provided one had the chakra reserves for it. And along with the side effects due to Kurama's presence, he could make even more than people who had the same amount of chakra he did. Naruto checked his chakra reserves and his own control. He realized that, as he was now, he could use a maximum of 20 shadow clones. He could create more, sure. But any more than that and he wouldn't be able to train his own body. Either that or he'd collapse from chakra exhaustion. Okay, good to go from here. Naruto thought for a few moments and nodded to himself, then seamlessly created 20 shadow clones. They all knew their orders and got to work on them. 10 of them would work on further improving their chakra control, with 5 of them practicing tree walking along with spinning a leaf above each of their fingers, while the other 5 did the same, but water walking instead. 5 more clones would work on getting used to the new body by doing some reflex training for muscle memory, with them sparring against each other in a light fashion. 3 more would go hunting in the forests outside the training ground for some food, while the last 2 went to the village to get some useful books. He concluded that he didn't need any nature affinity training at the moment, so he tried to spend his resources wisely. The real Naruto opted to alternate between tree walking and water walking, since he obviously didn't have enough nutrition or energy to do any good physical exercises without collapsing from weakness. So the least he could do was try to expand his chakra coils by doing extensive chakra usage. This was because, while his clones could improve his control, the chakra coils themselves were a physical faculty and would hence need to be developed by the real body. He decided to reinforce his entire body with flowing chakra while doing the chakra control exercises so as to use more chakra and hence improve the coils more. He really couldn't test any jutsu right now since it was very risky with his young and underdeveloped body along with the smaller chakra reserves. He already had low Chunin level chakra reserves despite being 5 years old, but he wasn't stupid enough to risk anything on it just yet. After a few hours, the 3 clones that went hunting to get some food returned with 5 hairs, along with some makeshift hunting tools made from sticks, sharp stones, long grass and leaves. In a moment, 2 more clones came back carrying some books. They reported to the real Naruto that they had to use henge, transformation, to get into the library without raising any suspicion. One of the books was titled Plants of the Wild, which had information on some useful herbs and their applications, along with other plants. Another book was titled The Apprentice Cook, which had a crash course on cooking, along with a lot of basic recipes. Another book was titled General Geography, which had information regarding the current map of the elemental nations. The rest were basically tour guides on different countries. The blonde needed these to re-familiarize himself with the map of the past or present. In his time, many new villages and trading posts had been founded and the population itself had increased significantly, excluding the losses from the Fourth Shinobi War. The two clones who just returned joined with the other three and helped to make a fire pit with some stones and twigs. They came together and combined their weak fire chakra to create a small spark on the twigs, which then started to burn. They used some tips from the cookbook and cooked 2 of the 5 hares they had caught. All of the clones and the original Naruto started to drool slightly at the smell and rushed to the spot. Naruto dispelled the 5 tree-walking clones at once and then the water-walking group. Then he dispelled the remaining 10 at once. He was happy to note that he didn't feel disoriented at all from the memory rush and proceeded to eat the cooked food. Naruto finished his meal around 5 in the evening. He cleaned himself and recreated the 20 shadow clones. 10 of them went back to doing the chakra control exercises, whereas 5 more sat down under the shade of a tree to read the books they had. The last 5 found some suitable sticks and sat down near a dirt patch. They began writing random stuff and sentences on the dirt. Naruto decided to do this because he wanted to re-practice his handwriting with his younger body to get used to the smaller limbs and fingers. He did this because back when he was older, he had already come close to mastering the art of Genjutsu. This was an art both of his parents as well as his godfather were proficient in, and he had wanted to master it as well. But one of the main requirements for this art was to have clear and perfect handwriting. He should be able to write anything he wanted swiftly and accurately, without any sort of mistakes. As a result, his handwriting had become quite beautiful, and he himself had created many new seals as well. Thankfully for him, it wasn't too hard to get back his precise handwriting. From seeing the progress the 5 clones were making, he was sure that after a couple days of practice, he'd be able to write just like before. The real Naruto nodded and went back to continue the same exercise he did in the afternoon. As the sun set and stars were starting to appear in the sky, Naruto decided to wrap things up and dispelled his clones as he put the makeshift hunting tools on a tree branch. He gathered the books his clones had brought, as well as the remaining 3 hares, and walked out of the training ground, back to his apartment. After Naruto got back to his apartment, he took a quick shower and then followed the instructions in the cookbook as he tried to make a dish using the 3 hares. After he finished, he got a glass of water and went to the table. He then nervously started to eat his first ever dish besides ramen, in this timeline, at least. He was glad to note that it tasted okay, more so than the meal he had in the training ground, but knew that it was still below normal grades. He would have to practice cooking more in order to be able to make delicious dishes. After his meal, he washed the dishes and came back to the room. He made 4 shadow clones and told them to finish reading the books and dispel themselves after they were finished. He then went to relieve himself and then went to bed. He made himself comfortable on the not at all comfortable bed and drifted off into sleep while his consciousness went into his mindscape. It was also nighttime in the mindscape where Naruto saw Kurama sleeping beside a tree, but noticed that the goddess was nowhere in sight and the lights of the house in his mindscape were turned off. Naruto shrugged and lay down on a nice spot on the grass and looked up at the stars. The day had been a pretty productive day. I got my own training ground, I became friends with Shika and the others, I learned to cook, I learned about new plants and got in some training. This was one of the most satisfying days I've had in a long time. Naruto said silently to himself. I would say so as well, Naruto-kun. A voice came from behind him. The goddess walked near him and laid down on the ground right next to the young blonde boy. You even managed to entertain me on the very first day of my vacation. She said to him, smiling. Vacation, eh? Naruto asked with a foxy grin and laughed heartily. He calmed down and looked at the goddess who was laying on her side, watching the boy from just half a foot away from his face. Naruto blushed at her closeness and turned back to look at the stars while the goddess chuckled silently. After calming himself, Naruto looked back at her with a warm smile on his face. Ami-chan, thank you. He said to her. The goddess made a confused face and just stared at him. Now that I'm back, I hope I can save some of my loved ones from dying early. He said to her with determination in his eyes and a smile on his face. The goddess understood his thoughts and smiled warmly. She gave him a loving hug and replied, you're welcome, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled in reply. After a while, she got an idea and put on a teasing smile. So do you like this? She asked a boy who nodded absent-mindedly with a smile while watching the many colorful stars. Her smile evolved into a grin. So then do you want to have some fun with me, Naruto-kun? She whispered seductively into his ear. Naruto turned his head to look at her golden eyes with his blue eyes. After a split second of confusion, he realized what she was talking about. His face then gained a bright shade of red as the goddess looked at him with an amused face, then laughed. Naruto looked away from her with a red face. If you do anything to a kid like me, I'm gonna call you Iromagami, pervert goddess, for the rest of my life. The goddess chuckled and looked at him as he turned back. Yes. I apologize, Naruto-kun. But then do you mean that I can play with you after you grow up? Naruto blushed once again and turned his head to the side away from her. Whatever. Good night, Kami-chan. The violet-haired goddess turned to lay on her back and closed her eyes, with a smile on her face. Good night, Naruto-kun. Naruto woke up at around 7 the next morning and brushed his teeth. He then went out for a jog around the neighborhood. Since he already knew of his ridiculous stamina, he picked up the pace after each lap to make himself as tired as possible. After about 30 laps around the small neighborhood, he re-entered his apartment at 8:30 and went to have a thorough shower, while ignoring the low temperature of the water. After he came out of the shower, he noticed that the clones he had left last night had neatly placed the books on the table. He checked his memories and nodded to himself. He made 2 shadow clones who then hinged themselves into the forms they used to get into the library, after which he told them to return the books, while he gave them some coins. They nodded and walked out of the apartment. Naruto then used his new knowledge to quickly whip up a salad using some ingredients which were lying in his refrigerator. The salad was slightly better than his previous dish and vowed to practice some more when he got some money to buy new ingredients. He put on his white t-shirt and black shorts and left his apartment, then went straight to training ground 42. After reaching there, he checked himself for a moment, then made 30 shadow clones, 10 more than the previous day, thanks to his extensive training. The 2 clones from earlier had already dispelled by this time. They all nodded to him and got to their own work. 5 of them took to tree walking with spinning a leaf above each finger, while 5 more took to doing the same while water walking. 5 more clones decided to focus solely on the leaf concentration exercise by spinning 2 and gradually 3 leaves on each of their fingers. Naruto had noticed the previous day that his chakra control wasn't as good as he thought it would be, but was instead as good as a mid-level Chunin's. He didn't understand why it was like that, but just decided to forget about it and train his chakra control as usual anyway. 5 more clones continued to refine their handwriting, now practicing with pencils on some empty notebooks he had found in his apartment. 8 of the remaining 10 clones went to the middle of the clearing and started to practice taijutsu, while the last 2 got the hunting tools from the tree branch and went to get some food for lunch. It would be a while until he would be able to practice ninjutsu without any extreme risks. The real Naruto was readying himself to do some vigorous physical exercises. Thanks to him getting a mixed diet the previous day and some vegetables today morning, he had gained some good nutrition in his body. Kurama had already started working on multiplying it with as much efficiency as possible and improved his body. Naruto's body now looked similar to a normal 5-year-old's, at last. Naruto tied some thick heavy pieces of wood to his forearms and his lower legs using some bandages, substituting them as weights for the time being. He then started to run around the training ground with increasing speed, working up a good sweat. He later joined the taijutsu group to not fall back on developing his battle senses. His instincts were honed from many years of battle already and were practically a sixth sense, but his young body's senses still needed to be improved. The young blonde stopped his training around 1 in the afternoon. He briefly cooked and ate the 2 hares his clones had managed to catch. He removed his weights and rotated his arms to remove cramps. He then dispelled and recreated the 30 clones to gain their knowledge and told them to keep working and allowed them to switch with other groups if they wanted. He went out of the training ground to meet his friends as he had promised the previous day. Yo all. Having fun. He greeted Shikamaru, Chimjai and Ino, who were cloudjazing, eating and shouting respectively. All 3 of them turned to the blonde. Ino's face lit up in happiness, then jumped towards him and hugged him tightly. She then let go of him and greeted him back. You're here. I was wondering when you'd show up. Ino said to him happily. Haha. Well, I was a little busy in the morning, so I'm here now. Naruto replied with a foxy grin. He then greeted Chimjai, who greeted him back, then turned to Shikamaru. Yo Shika. Did you get any better in Shimgai? He asked a pineapple hair-styled boy with a smirk. Shikamaru smirked back. Troublesome, why don't we find out? He challenged as he prepared the Shimgai board into pieces. Naruto helped him, then sat to play a few games with him. He then proceeded to wipe the floor with his opponent 4 times, with every match lasting 2 to 4 minutes longer than the last, with Shikamaru making his thinking pose 5 to 6 times every match. Naruto then got up to talk and play with the other 2 for a while, until it was time for the trio to go home. Ino gave him another hug and then left as he waved back to them. Weird. Ino's never hugged me that much before. Scratch that, she's never even touched me much before. Naruto thought as he left the park to head for the training ground. You can't be serious, can you? The goddess asked him in disbelief. Yeah. She's never been that close to me until today. No, not that. I mean, well, whatever. Maybe she likes me a bit now, since she hasn't met Sasuke team yet. And that is a convincing theory. The goddess replied, at least he's not totally dense. She thought to herself and sighed inwardly in relief. I can probably become good friends with the three of them at this rate. Anyway, I gotta go train now. Naruto said to his divine tenant as he ran back to the training ground. Naruto returned to the training ground to see that some of the clones had dispelled, possibly due to using up their chakra. A quick glance at his memories indeed revealed that to be the case. He dispelled all of the remaining clones except the hunting pair and recreated them. All of them resumed their work while Naruto got ready to do some running and sparring again. But the amount of time he had until nightfall, he managed to get in some chakra control exercises as well, which helped to further expand his reserves. Naruto then went home and cooked the day's catch and ate it, which still needed improvement. He then took a quick shower, cursing the cold water, and went to bed at 11 in the night. The next few days were basically the same process repeated. Naruto wakes at around 7, goes for a jog, eats a meal he made from the herbs he found in the forest or leftovers from the previous night, goes to train until afternoon, has lunch made from caught hares and rabbits, meets and plays with Shika, Chimjai and Ino, trains some more in the evening, eats a home-cooked meal using the herbs and catch from the day and goes to sleep. This continued for a while until one day when he came to the park a little early than usual and stumbled into an interesting situation. 3 boys around the age of 8 were surrounding a scared girl who had very familiar pink hair. Naruto hid near the entrance to the park, trying to understand what was going on in the sand pit. 3 boys who seemed a few years older than him were standing around a single girl who was cowering in fear. He then saw another girl in front of the scared girl, who seemed like she was defending the one behind her. With some focus, he found out that it was actually Ino. Naruto moved in for a better view and finally saw the pink hair the other girl had. His eyes widened and then a smirk formed on his face. "Get out of the way, Blondie. We got some business with Forehead over there," said the boy in the middle, seemingly the leader of the 3. "No, go away. I won't let you hurt Sakura," Ino said, trying to defend her friend, all the while shaking in fear herself. "Ha! As if you can stop us, girl. We're from the Ninja Academy and you're just kids," another boy on the side said. He then pushed Ino away, who fell on the ground rather harshly. They didn't realize what they were getting into until that happened. Immediately, the park was flooded with killing intent and became eerily quiet. The 3 boys were sweating considerably at the moment and were on the verge of losing their breath. The girls though didn't feel much of anything and watched with confusion the boys who were bullying them a second ago. "Boy." The boys flinched and turned shakily towards the voice behind them and regretted that they did so. Behind them was a blonde boy shorter than them and a few years younger as well. But what he lacked in size and age, he had with his presence. His face clearly showed barely contained anger towards them with a twitching eye, but had a calm expression, making the silent rage even more profound, along with his ice-cold blue eyes with slit pupils, looking at each of them like he was about to pounce on them. His hands were twitching as if holding himself back to not kill them accidentally. The bullies, for their part, fell on their butts and emptied their bladders. The young boy's face turned to disgust, along with the anger he was holding in. "That lost," the blonde said with narrowed eyes. The 3 boys didn't need any more initiative as they took off towards the exit, rolling and tumbling along the way. The 2 girls stared in awe at their savior who was looking at the exit. He had just driven off 3 boys, all older than them, without even lifting a finger. Suddenly, whatever heavy mood was in the air lifted and the blonde turned to the girls with a foxy grin on his face. "Yo, Ino-chan." Ino though jumped on him and he fell on the ground with her in tow. The platinum blonde-haired girl held him tightly in her arms, not letting go. "Arrogant, Naruto arrogant," she muttered with closed teary eyes. Naruto smiled and rubbed her back gently, calming her down. After a minute or two, Ino got up and rubbed her eyes. She then turned to the pink head, who was sitting on the ground watching them, and grinned. Naruto also got up and dusted himself off. "Naruto, this girl is my best friend, Sakura." Ino gestured to the pink head and then towards the bright blonde and Sakura. "This is Naruto." "Yo. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. Nice to meet you," he greeted as he extended his hand towards her. The shy pink head took the hand slowly. "I'm Haruno Sakura, nice to meet you too," she greeted back as the blonde pulled her up from the ground. Naruto gave her a grin and then turned to the other girl. "Ino-chan, what were those guys doing here?" Ino's face saddened and she put a hand on Sakura's shoulder. "Those boys come here sometimes and bully on us." "Well, mostly Sakura because of her wide forehead and shyness. That's it. They bully her just for that. And they call themselves Ninja Academy students, PFF. If kids like that become ninja, they'd be a nuisance to society." He turned to the downtrodden pink head. "Don't worry about it, Sakura-chan. Those guys are just idiots. If you have a big forehead, then that means you have a big head, then that means you're really smart," he told her with a happy grin. Sakura looked up at him with a kind of puzzled expression. "Really? Of course. Very smart people have bigger heads, then you must be too." The pink head's face lit up with happiness and nodded vigorously. He gave her a foxy grin and turned back to Ino, who was looking at them with a surprised face. By the way, Ino-chan, where are Shika and Shinji? Ino shook herself out of her thoughts and looked back at Naruto. Oh, they're not coming today. Their clans have a meeting so they're a bit busy. I didn't have any work today so I came here to play with Sakura. Naruto shrugged. Well, it's okay. They'll be back tomorrow. Anyway, why don't we play for a while then? The three of them nodded happily and played in the park for a while. Sakura chatted happily with Naruto, while Ino was pleasantly surprised that Sakura opened up to someone else so quickly. When it was nearing 3:30 in the afternoon, they were all a little tired and sat down at the bench. While the two girls were talking to each other, Naruto appeared to be thinking about something. The two girls turned and looked at him confused. What's wrong, Naruto? Naruto smiled and turned to Sakura. Sakura-chan, I want you to come here tomorrow in the afternoon at around 2. Sakura frowned slightly. Why? The blonde boy smirked. I know a way to prove you're smart. Both the girls tilted their heads while Naruto got off the bench. Well then, I'll see you two again tomorrow. He said and ran off while waving goodbye before the two could say anything. They just stared at his back as he ran off. I wonder why he left so early today. Ino thought out loud. After a few minutes, 4 people came rushing into the park and looked around until they found the two girls. The 4 dashed towards them and hugged them immediately. The girls realized after a second that they were being hugged by their parents. Ino-chan, Sakura-chan. The 4 of them shouted. What's wrong, Autumn-san? Okay-san, Mom? Ino asked her parents. I heard some people saying that you and Sakura-chan were being bullied in the park. So we came here. Inoichi said, letting go of her. So, where are they, Sakura-chan? Where are those boys that dared to bully my daughter? Chiharu asked angrily, looking around. Haruno Chiharu was a petite woman with pink hair and a round bob cut. She had a cute face with dark green eyes and was known for 2 things. One was her impressive patience and self-control. The other was the moments when she would lose said control and destroy people's ears with her voice when she was angry. She was also one of the members of the civilian side of the council and the mother of Sakura. Autumn-san, they're gone. Our friend chased them away already over an hour ago. Ino replied to her father. The 4 parents looked at the 2 girls skeptically. Really? Who is that friend? Mana asked her daughter. Yamanaka Mana was a beautiful woman with long silky brown hair which reached just above her thighs. She would usually let it hang free while one of the long bangs would cover her right eye. Her eyes were a light blue and almost always had a glint of playfulness in them. She was a retired Jimnin Kunoichi who was famous for her combination of sensory and trap setting skills, a deadly combination if any. Unknown to people outside her family, she had a bit of a perverted side which led to amusing situations sometimes. She was the matriarch of the Yamanaka family and the mother of Ino. Ino grinned brightly. He's a kid that me, Shikamaru and Shinji met a few days ago and Sakura met today. His name is Naruto. The 4 adults frowned slightly. What does he look like? Well, he has blonde spiky hair and pretty blue eyes. He also has some kind of whisker marks on his face. She replied happily. I think they look cute though. The parents' eyes widened as they recognized who their daughters were talking about. They were even more surprised when they saw Ino grin happily and even Sakura smile. All of them knew that Sakura was very shy and doesn't open herself up to people easily. What did he do to those bullies? Chiharu mother asked nervously. I don't know actually. He just called them from behind and when they looked back, they just fell down and their pants became wet. He told them to get lost and they just ran away as fast as they could. Inoichi raised an eyebrow. Did you see anything else? No, nothing. But now that you mention it, I felt that the air back then was kind of heavy, I think. Inoichi and Mana's eyes widened at the revelation. Killing intent. Such a young boy used killing intent to drive them away. And he was careful not to affect the girls either, Inoichi thought and then frowned. Something's not right. No normal 5-year-old should be able to do that. He comes to play with us every day in the afternoon. He has some matches of Shinji with Shikamaru and plays with me and Shinji too. Ino continued, snapping Inoichi from his thoughts. He smiled at her and patted her head. Well, I guess I have to thank him for saving my precious daughter. Inoichi released her as Mana hugged her again. Meanwhile, Chiharu and her husband Kizashi were making sure their daughter was safe and unharmed. Sakura thought for a moment then turned to her parents. Autumn-san, okay-san, is it okay if I come here again tomorrow? The parents glanced at each other then back to Sakura. Alright dear. You can come. Sakura smiled, then said goodbye to Ino and left with her parents. Ino and her parents also left the park soon after. Inoichi though was in thought. Last time I saw the boy, he was just roaming around the village with nothing on his mind after getting kicked out of a store. I should meet the lad again sometime. I hope that doesn't have anything to do with this. Phew. Managed to get away just before they came. Naruto thought to himself, wiping away some imaginary sweat. Why did you do that anyway? Asked the confused goddess in his mind. I sensed Inoichi-san coming there. You see, he works in the torture and interrogation department. He's also the best mind reader Konoha has. And if he sees me acting this different in only a week, he'd probably know something is going on and do things that I don't exactly need right now. He clarified to her. Ooh. So that's why you did that? She said in a bored tone. Naruto raised an eyebrow at her voice. Kami-chan. What's wrong? Did something happen? The goddess yawned and rubbed her eyes. Oh, no. Nothing's wrong, Naruto-kun. It's just that the last few days have been pretty boring with the repetitive schedule of yours. I'm actually surprised that Kurama-chan managed to keep quiet all this time. She looked around for the fox and sweat dropped upon finding him. Said giant fox was currently climbing one of the mountains in the mindscape to relieve himself of his boredom. On second thought, I take that back. Maybe I should climb a mountain too. Kurama just snorted at them. It's not a big deal. People get used to it after spending about 4 decades in a sewer. Right now, I'm actually pumped up get to the top of this thing. It's been more than a century since I was freely exposed to nature, except the times the kid let me out for a while to enjoy myself. When he does though, it's always in the weirdest places. Once he released me on the moon then told me write something on it. What the hell, kid? The goddess's eyes gleamed for some unknown reason, and she immediately ran towards one of the nearby mountains. Naruto's sweat dropped at the two entities in his mind and shook his head. I never will understand the thinking of Big-kun goddesses. He then decided to go Ichiraku's to grab Ramen after so long and then back to training. The next day, Ino brought Sakura to the park to meet the 3 boys. After the introductions, Naruto asked Sakura to play a match of Shingai with Shikamaru. Though reluctant at first, she relented and played a match. The match lasted nearly an hour and needless to say, Shikamaru was fairly motivated as well. Ultimately, it ended with Shikamaru's victory, who was understandably happy that he finally won a match after so many days. Sakura was a little bitter at her loss, but cheered up with Naruto's help. Later, they all played around the park except Shikamaru, who opted to clouches instead. This continued for about 4 days until Naruto remembered a certain detail of his past. The next morning, Naruto got up and finished his morning jog and shower, quickly ate a cup of instant ramen, and dashed off to his personal training ground. Upon reaching there, he created 40 shadow clones and put them to work with refining his chakra control, calligraphy, hunting and sparring to readjust his taijutsu to his younger body. After they settled into their tasks, the original Naruto rushed off to the Hokage tower. Upon reaching his destination at around 10 in the morning, Naruto walked up to the secretary and asked for an appointment with the Hokage. The woman behind the desk raised an eyebrow at the young boy's newfound manners, who instead usually burst into the Hokage's office without taking shit from anyone. She got out of her thoughts and nodded to the young blonde, then went away to talk to their village leader. Naruto was also moderately fond of the short brown-haired woman, since she was one of the people who didn't care about his tenant and instead treated him like a normal person, not too familiar with him, but definitely didn't hate him. The secretary woman came back and told the blonde that he can visit now. Naruto thanked and bowed to her, then walked to the office. The woman was now fairly shocked that the usually disrespectful blonde actually bowed to her and thanked her. She went back to her desk in a slight daze and got back to her work. Naruto opened the door to the office and saw his grandfather figure behind the desk with a few short stacks of paper on it. Hiruzen saw his surrogate grandson enter the office and smiled. Good morning, Naruto-kun. What brings you here today? And how come you're actually entering in a normal way? The old Hokage greeted and asked the blonde. The blonde chuckled and took a seat, then faced him. Good morning, Jai-chan. I actually came here to ask for the weekly allowance you used to give me. As for my way of entering, well, I just wanted to stop being a nuisance to some people. Especially the secretary lady, the Anbu here and you. Though if you want, I'll find some other way of entering dramatically. He said to his grandfather figure, who chuckled in response, then took out 2 envelopes from a drawer and placed them in front of the blonde. That is fine. Here is your allowance for this week as well as last week's. Though I must say, I'm surprised that you forgot about it. Are you eating well, Naruto-kun? He asked in a worried tone. Naruto grinned, then got down from the seat and stood straight. I'm fine, Jai-chan. I actually hunt my own food in the forest around my place. I eat something besides ramen now too. See? I think I've grown taller an inch or 2. The old Hokage looked at the blonde with a calculating look, then smiled and shook his head. Naruto's face turned into one of horror, then got back to his seat with fake dejection and took the 2 envelopes. I am happy with that, Naruto-kun. A balanced diet is important for a healthy body. Hiruzen said and got back to his paperwork. Naruto looked at him with a confused face, then voiced his thoughts. Hey Jai-chan, why aren't you using Kage Bunshin for the paperwork? He asked. The old man just sighed in reply, well you see, I did use them for the first few days. But then, they just got fed up of it and dispelled themselves. Naruto looked at the old Hokage with a deadpan look. Let me guess. You put your clones to work while you read your porn, is that right? A third coughed loudly with a tinge of pink on his face, while the three Anbu in the room snickered audibly. The goddess in Naruto's mind also laughed lightly. Well, something like that. The blonde sighed and shook his head. Jai-chan, you have to treat them with more respect. If you want them to help you, then you have to help them as well. You can't just dump your work on them and enjoy yourself. He said, while the Hokage hung his head slightly. The others were quite amused that their village leader was getting lectured by a 5-year-old. Anyway, are you free today, Jai-chan? I want you to come with me for some shopping. Those guys don't let me buy anything and I'm pretty tired of using henge all the time. Naruto said while his surrogate grandfather looked confused. Naruto then pointed to his stomach and the old Hokage realized what he was talking about. He frowned but then shook his head. I see. But I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. I have to finish all this paperwork first. He said. Naruto looked at him blankly, then put his palm to his face and shook his head. Hiruzen blinked once and looked around to see the others doing the same thing. He blinked again then realized. He facepalmed himself, then nodded and got up from his chair and walked towards the door while Naruto followed. The old Hokage turned and made a cross seal and summoned 3 clones. The original then bowed to them. All the others looked at the awkward side of the third Hokage, bowing to 3 more third Hokages, then left. The secretary was about to say something when she came near the 2, but Hiruzen pointed into the office. She saw the 3 clones working inside the office, then turned back to the 2. Hiruzen continued to walk while Naruto waved back at her. The brown-haired woman looked back to the office, then shrugged and waved back to the blonde with a smile. So what exactly did you need to buy, Naruto-kun? Sarutobi Hiruzen asked his surrogate grandson while both walked through the streets of Konoha. A lot of stuff actually. Training equipment, cooking utensils, ingredients, kenjutsu supplies and some other stuff. Naruto replied while Hiruzen nodded for each item in the list until he heard the last one. He snapped his head to the blonde with a surprised expression. You know kenjutsu, Naruto-kun? Yeah, I do. I know a lot of formulas too. Probably even more than Jiraiya. But with my handwriting being what it is right now, I can only use the lower grade ones that aren't too dangerous. I'll have to wait until I get my calligraphy perfect before I can use the better ones. The blonde replied. The old Hokage turned forward and smiled. It seems the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The 2 reached their destination, which was a ninja shop which looked mediocre in all aspects. Hiruzen frowned and turned to the young boy, then stopped him before he entered the store. Naruto looked at his grandfather figure with a puzzled face while Hiruzen shook his head. While I am happy that you are not spoilt with a life of luxury, Naruto-kun, I have a better idea. Follow me. He said and walked off while Naruto looked at him, then shrugged and followed behind him. They both walked for a few minutes while Hiruzen observed the occasional glare sent at the young blonde who did not even notice them or ignored them. Hiruzen speculated that most people were behaving themselves only because he was there at the moment. Eventually, they reached the store which looked like a normal ninja shop named Shirabuki Ninja Tools, but Hiruzen assured Naruto that the shop was anything but normal. They entered the store and immediately Naruto raised his eyebrows in surprise. The shop consisted of numerous aisles, many of them filled with weapons of different shapes and sizes. There were seemingly countless weapons there and Naruto's thoughts went to a certain weapon-crazed girl he knew of. Some other aisles consisted of paper tags and scrolls, while another one was dedicated to shuriken and kunai. He also managed to spot some clothes hangers at the far end which he assumed to be the clothing part of the shop. He returned his attention to his grandfather who was walking up to the counter and followed behind him. Good morning, Shigeru-san. Hiruzen greeted the bored man behind the counter. The now named man, Shigeru looked up from the counter and instantly straightened himself and brightened up. Oh. Good morning, Hokage-sama. Good to see you. What brings you here today? Shigeru was a fairly tall man with a well-built body and light brown skin. He was wearing what looked like a black sleeveless China traditional shirt and tan pants. He also had red bracers on his wrists and was wearing a pair of jeta. He had spiky brown hair which was neatly kept along with a stern-looking face but was smiling at the moment. The third Hokage nodded and gestured to the young blonde boy who was viewing the weapons on a nearby shelf. We are here today to get some training equipment for Naruto-kun here. Shigeru looked at the boy and widened his eyes, then turned back to the Hokage-sama. Naruto is he Minato's, he asked in an unsure tone while the old Hokage nodded in affirmation. Shigeru calmed himself down while Hiruzen called Naruto over. Naruto-kun, this man is Shirabuki Shigeru. He is the owner of what I believe to be the best ninja store in Konoha. Hiruzen introduced the man while said man rubbed the back of his head in response to the praise. The man offered an extended hand to the blonde. Good to see ya, kid. My name's Shigeru. He said while the blonde took and shook his hand with his own tiny one. Nice to meet you, Shigeru-san. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. He greeted in response. The Hokage cleared his throat and turned to Naruto. Naruto-kun, from now onwards, you can buy anything you want from here. This place has a range of weapons, tools, scrolls and shinobi clothes. He said and the boy nodded. The blonde then turned back to Shigeru. Shigeru-san, I need some practice shuriken and kunai, along with some durable clothes for training. By any chance, if you have any training weights for someone my age, I would also like a set of those. I also need some basic genjutsu supplies. Naruto said to the owner of the store. Shigeru though just stared slack-jawed at the blonde before turning and looking at the Hokage who was watching the man with an amused expression. Hokage-sama, I thought the kid was 5 years old. Hiruzen smirked in amusement. Yes. Yes, he is so. So, I the man then sighed and went towards one of the racks of weapons. Fine. I'll get those items. You just wait there. Naruto turned to his grandfather in confusion. Well said. Grandfather was chuckling. After a few minutes, Shigeru came back with 2 small boxes and 1 bigger box. He put them on the counter and turned to the blonde. Alright kid. These 2 smaller boxes have the practice kunai and shuriken with 10 kunai and 20 shuriken. The bigger box has the genjutsu supplies, which is actually 10 bottles of chakra conductive ink, 3 brushes and a whole lot of paper. We have better quality ink and brushes, but I ain't gonna sell them to you until you get better with genjutsu. You got all that? Shigeru asked, expecting the boy to get a headache from all the information. But he was pleasantly surprised when the boy just nodded to him without asking a question. He turned to the Hokage who just shrugged his shoulders, then turned back to the blonde. The chakra ink is for novices really. A true genjutsu master can create a seal anywhere, anytime. Even from thin air. Though there aren't many people like that anymore. I don't think even Jiraiya-sama can do that. But I could be wrong. Anyways, we have some clothes which are suitable for training, but we don't have any that can fit you, what with you being a kid and all. So you can come back and get one when you grow up a bit, alright kid? He asked. Naruto's eyebrow twitched, but he nodded regardless. Alright. Practice kunai and shuriken cost 1000 ryo box each. 10 bottles of basic chakra ink cost 10,000 ryo, 3 brushes for 1500 ryo, and 200 sheets of paper for 500 ryo. So, total price is 14,000 ryo. Shigeru said, tallying the price behind the counter. Naruto frowned at that and reached for his pocket, but Hiruzen put a hand on the boy's shoulder and shook his head. I'll pay for you this once, Naruto-kun. Consider it a gift from me. He said and Naruto hesitantly nodded. He knew he couldn't win an argument his Jai-chan at the moment, so he just relented. Hiruzen paid for the items and took the bigger box, while giving the smaller 2 to Naruto. Naruto bowed to Shigeru, who nodded his head and then walked out of the store. You can shop there from now on, Naruto-kun. He's one of the men that I trust who wouldn't judge you by your tenant. The old Hokage said to the blonde, who smiled and nodded. He then looked around and went into a nearby alley. Hiruzen followed the boy into the alley out of curiosity. Once there, Naruto looked around again and 2 shadow clones puffed into existence without any warning. Hiruzen blinked in surprise at his surrogate grandson's mastery over the technique. The 2 clones then hinged themselves into 2 random people. Naruto told them to take the boxes back home, as they nodded and took the 3 boxes, then walked off. Hiruzen smiled at the blonde's ingenuity as the 2 walked out of the alley. The 2 walked to a cooking store where they bought some kitchen tools, then visited a general store to get some other essentials, this time paying with his own money. Naruto made another clone and told him to take the stuff back home as well. The 2 then continued to walk towards the market to get the cooking ingredients the blonde said he needed. While walking, the blonde wanted to clear a certain doubt that he had in mind. Kami-chan. The goddess was sitting on her bed in her house in Naruto's mindscape, brushing her silky violet hair. She twitched suddenly at Naruto's voice, but continued to brush her hair. What is it, Naruto-kun? I wanted to ask something, Kami-chan. The goddess raised an eyebrow but nodded. What do you need to ask? I wanted to ask if it's okay to live a completely different life than before. Is it okay if I start making major changes from my original life? The violet-haired goddess smiled and shook her head at her host's worries. It's alright, Naruto-kun. You don't have to worry about anything happening if you do something very different. You've already made many changes than before already, haven't you? You've befriended Ino-chan and her friends and also told Hiru-kun your secret. The blonde nodded hesitantly while he and Hiruzen were still walking. The woman smiled and put the brush down. She put on a silver clip on her hair just above the left side of her face. I'm really serious, Naruto-kun. You need to stop thinking of this as a replay of your previous life. It isn't a thing like that. This is in fact a second chance for life to you. You can live however you want without caring for any non-existent laws, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled at her assurance and thanked her arrogant Kami-chan. I don't mind, Naruto-kun. I don't mind. The goddess said, while the blonde nodded. The goddess then smiled brightly as she got out of the house. He thinks that I didn't notice it, but in fact I did. Even though he's given so much freedom, he was still making sure that he doesn't create any problems for me by doing anything unnecessary. Even after everything, he still wants to keep other people's wishes before his own. She thought as she walked off into the fields. Naruto took a deep breath, then turned to his surrogate grandfather. Jai-chan, I have a favor to ask. Hiruzen turned to his surrogate grandson with curiosity. What is it, Naruto-kun? I want to meet Jiraiya, Jai-chan. Jiraiya of the Sannin. Your student. He said with some uncertainty in his voice. The old Hokage raised an eyebrow. Why? Naruto looked down sadly because he paused once, then continued. Bad things happen in the future, Jai-chan. To you and to him. The old man widened his eyes, then looked forward again. When do you want to meet him? The blonde sighed and looked forward as well. After a year, I guess. Preferably, my next birthday. The only reason I told you now is because I know he's always busy with his spy network, so I wanted to make an appointment of sorts. Hiruzen exhaled and looked at the bright afternoon sky. I understand. I will contact him and ask him to return on that day then. Naruto nodded and continued to walk. He then caught sight of a restaurant on the way and drooled uncontrollably. The old Hokage chuckled and led him there to get some lunch. The owner glared at Naruto, but the Hokage convinced him to let the boy visit and made sure that they wouldn't ever restrict him from visiting again. Naruto grinned at his surrogate grandfather and the two finished lunch around 2 in the afternoon. They later continued on their way to the market district. Upon reaching their destination, they found a rather interesting event at the spot. A ninja, presumably a Chunin, was trying to extort money from a vegetable vendor. The vendor was a near 10-year-old girl with dark green shoulder-length hair. Hey damn it. Give me the money you owe me, girl. Said the near 20-year-old male ninja. What? What money? I've never even seen your face until today. Said the dark green-haired girl behind the counter. The people around her were whispering that her father, who was the owner of the shop, wasn't there when her daughter needed help. The man slammed his hand on the counter and threw away some of the vegetables on it. Your father owes me 100,000 ryo from yesterday night, girl. Now I want you to give it to me. The girl looked at his face for a few seconds, then gasped. Why you? I know you. You were there yesterday at the bar. I saw you from outside, playing cards with some other people and my father. I saw him win fairly and you just slammed the table and walked out. My father won that money fair and square. He doesn't owe you anything. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes dangerously at the ninja and was about to move, but noticed that his blonde grandson was not beside him anymore. The ninja clicked his tongue and glared at the girl, who winced at his gaze. Damn it, girl. We ninja are the ones who protect you from all the bandits and idiots who try to kill you. You owe us your lives because of that. It was also us ninjas who protected you from the Kage. He suddenly spit out. The man, girl and everyone else around noticed that his throat was being crushed with a leg belonging to a young blonde boy. The blonde dropped to the ground while the man grabbed his own throat and coughed violently. He glared at the young boy and recognized him instantly. You. He spat out between coughs. The young blonde glared right back at the man. You're a disgrace for a shinobi of Konoha. I can't believe scum like you even managed to become one. The man's coughing calmed down and then spat at the young boy, who tilted his head to avoid it. And what are you gonna do about it, Stupid dem. You don't deserve to be a shinobi of Konoha, much less a Chunin. Naruto cut him off while the man glared at him. Isn't that right? The blonde turned his head to the side. Hokage-sama. Everyone present snapped their heads to the direction the blonde turned to and saw their village leader, the third Hokage, glaring at the man who now started to tremble in fear. He walked towards them and everyone around seemed to have their hair on end and were standing ramrod straight. Such was the aura of the man known as the god of shinobi. You are absolutely right, Naruto-kun. Scum like this isn't needed in my forces. He said and extended his hand with his palm facing upwards. Give me your forehead protector. The Hokage simply said while the man whimpered. But I was just. He stopped when he saw the Hokage's gaze intensify. He reluctantly removed his Konoha forehead protector and handed it to the Hokage. The old Hokage pocketed the item, then snapped his fingers. Immediately two Anbu appeared, bowing beside him. Take this filth to T&I and have him locked up for an indefinite period of time. Have Ibiki play with him if he wants. He said and the two Anbu proceeded to drag the man off who was struggling against them. The man scowled at the blonde who ruined his life in a matter of minutes. Said blonde turned his eyes into red slitted ones and glared back at him with total ferocity. The man saw the crimson eyes and started to sweat, then fell unconscious. The Anbu carrying him looked at him, then at the blonde who had reverted his eyes to blue, then back at the man. They simply shrugged, then disappeared with a shunshin along with the man, happy that their job became easier. While the villagers were thanking the Hokage for helping them, the girl who was being extorted walked up to the young boy and bowed to him. The blonde jumped in surprise as the other villagers turned to look at the two. Thank you. You saved me from that man. I don't know what he would have done to me otherwise. She said in a grateful tone. The blonde asked her to stand up straight, then shook his head. It's nothing. Don't think anything about it. That guy didn't deserve to be a ninja in the first place. The dark green-haired girl smiled while the blonde also smiled at her and continued, you know, ninja should protect the people without demanding unfair things from them. Me, I'm gonna grow up and become an awesome ninja and protect the whole village. I won't let anything happen to anyone in this village and I'm gonna be Hokage. Again he told her with the last part in his thoughts. I'm gonna be the best Hokage ever. Everyone in the village will look up to me and they'll be happy knowing that whatever they do, I'll protect them from everything with my own life. The girl as well as everyone else present stared at the young 5-year-old boy, listening to his declaration of future greatness. The girl smiled warmly and patted his head. I'm sure you will. I leave my life in your hands then. She said while ruffling his hair, while the young boy gained a tiny spot of pink on his face. Yeah. Leave it to me. He said with a foxy grin. The other villagers and vendors looked at each other and thought it out. Is this really the demon that killed their loved ones 5 years ago? Is this really the person who will someday destroy the village? Is this really the person they hate? After a few seconds, a man snickered and stepped forward from the crowd and patted the young boy's head. The blonde turned up to see one of the vendors from another nearby shop. Sure you will, kid. When you do become Hokage, buy me a drink will ya? The blonde grinned and held his thumb up, signaling his intent to do so. The man shook his head smiling and went back to his shop. The others chuckled at them and went back to their own businesses. The blonde grinned again and held a hand to the slightly taller dark green-haired girl. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. He said to her. The girl looked at him, then smiled and shook his hand. My name is Manami Yui. Nice to meet you too. She greeted in reply. Okay. Yui Nichan, can I buy some vegetables from you? Of course, come to the shop. You take what you want from the shelves while I clean up the mess. She said while the blonde nodded and both of them went towards the shop. They both tended to their own work while Naruto offered to help her, but she refused. The two of them spent quite a while just exchanging words while Naruto picked out a large selection of fresh vegetables. Hiruzen in the meanwhile was watching all this from a distance with a smile on his face. It seems he managed to improve his reputation in the market district with his actions, if only a little. With time, they may come to see past the fox within him and see him as a person. This is a good thing for him. He thought and turned to the direction the male ninja was taken away, though I must say, that chakra-enhanced kick was pretty strong for a 5-year-old. Granted, I've never seen a 5-year-old do that before anyway. After a few minutes, Naruto returned to the Hokage where he grinned at having made another new friend. Good job handling the situation back there, Naruto-kun. Also, I am sorry for harboring such a man within my shinobi ranks. He said in an apologetic tone. Naruto waved it off and looked back at him. It's alright, Jai-chan. It's not your fault. Anyway, I'll see you later, Jai-chan. I'm going back. Naruto said while his surrogate grandfather nodded his head and waved at him. Hiruzen watched him go off, then smiled and shunted it back to his office. As Naruto came back to his apartment, he created a shadow clone and immediately dispelled it, transmitting his orders to the clones at the training ground to dispel themselves. He sat on his couch in a comfortable position and processed the memories flowing into him from the clones. After that was done, he went on to check out his new equipment. Naruto now had some kunai and shuriken he could use to practice and readjust his throwing accuracy to his new perspective. Along with those were the new cooking apparatus he had bought, which would no doubt help in making better meals. For some reason, once he began learning cooking about a week ago, he began to look forward to his own homemade food, as odd as that was. He also had the Kenjutsu supplies that he could use to further refine his skills, as well as make the one type of seal he needed the most right now. A gravity seal. Alright, here we go. A detailed explanation of my version of one of the popular seals in Naruto fanfiction. You can skip to the next day and if you want. The gravity seal was one of the few seals that his father had invented and no one had learned, not even Jiraiya. After the war, Naruto had visited his parents' house and found many useful things. Even though Konoha had been destroyed twice, he was only lucky that the house was outside the range of most of the destruction, and even more lucky that his father's notes and important stuff were kept in an underground basement, which was also heavily fortified with seals. One of the things he had found was the gravity seal. His father's version simply made the object or body part it was applied on seem a little bit heavier. For significant effect, many of the seals would have to be applied on the same object. Naruto's reinvented version took the base concept and expanded it further. He stacked hundreds of them into a single seal, then systematically optimized it, reducing the size to a comfortably smaller one. Topping that off with a control seal, one could potentially possess a seal that could increase the gravity on an object to any number of times needed. This is done by the control seal increasing or decreasing the number of base gravity seals in effect at a given moment, while the rest would remain inactive. Naruto had designed the seal to go up to a maximum of 256 times normal gravity, which no human could possibly hope to withstand and would most likely drill a hole through the earth. But such danger was made to be avoided by putting in some restriction seals, which would lock access to higher levels unless the correct combination of hand seals are performed. When the gravity seal is used on a person for training purposes, needless to say, Boruto and Himawari had improved by leaps and bounds in the physical aspect of their training. The downside was that it took quite a bit of time to make alone. Since he already knew the finished product, Naruto would only need to make the final seal instead of making hundreds of them and optimizing them again. The thing is that the seal is actually quite a large one, which consumed 5 whole sheets due to its intricate array of lines and symbols, then with the help of a reduction seal, would shrink to the size of a baby's palm, and lastly an application seal, which would apply the seal from the paper to the target surface. If a single person with master class calligraphy and experience sat down to make one of them, he would take at least 2 hours to make it. In Naruto's case, he was lucky that the seal only took time to draw it and wasn't difficult in and of itself. So he would simply need to focus and draw slowly to get the desired result, which for Naruto would take a total of 4 hours for perfect results. True, 4 hours was not much. But for a single person to train effectively with gravity seals, he would need 5 of them, along with a linked control seal, and that's excluding the security measures. 1 gravity seal on each arm and leg, and 1 on the torso. The linked control seal would link all of them and provide a central command seal to tweak them simultaneously. The control seal was similar to a chakra storage seal, except with sensors. The sensors would check the level of chakra in the seal and produce a result depending on the amount. In this case, more chakra means more gravity acting. Though practically, even maximum chakra was comparable to the chakra of a newly admitted civilian ninja student. Another downside was that its activation was slow. It takes about an hour to activate completely. But this could also be an upside in terms of security. On the other hand, the deactivation was almost instant, meaning that its effect would disappear instantly once the chakra in the control seal was absorbed. And the description ends. Thank you for your patience and not destroying your monitor or cell phone in irritation. So ultimately, Naruto would need 20 and odd hours to make it available for training. He could use shadow clones, yes, but he wanted to have the satisfaction and sense of security of making it himself. And because of the time needed for that, he would need a silent environment with no disturbance. He knew of a room in the Hokage tower which was dedicated to the art of Genjutsu and was therefore a soundproof environment. He decided to ask the old Hokage for access to the room. By the time his thinking and planning was over, one of his shadow clones returned from the training ground carrying the day's catch. Naruto widened his eyes while the clone grinned widely. They had caught a single boar and nothing else. Naruto was surprised to see good game after a week of seeing hares and rabbits. Even more surprising was that it was a 5-year-old that caught it. This would probably last a few days if he used it resourcefully. It was now near 4 in the afternoon. So Naruto decided to get used to the new brush and ink for sealing. He spent the rest of the day practicing his calligraphy by making some storage scrolls and fragment parts of the gravity seal. Around 8 in the evening, he stopped and then went to work on making dinner. He, along with another clone, skinned the boar carefully, then cleaned it and put the cut meat in the refrigerator. Though they still used a small batch to make some side dish to go with a bowl of ramen. He then went to bed with a smile on his face, happy with the progress he made today. The next day, he woke earlier than usual and finished his normal routine. Naruto packed all the necessary Genjutsu equipment into some self-made storage scrolls. He then dashed off to the training ground. Upon reaching, he created 40 clones again and instructed them to train in the usual fields but exclude hunting. Instead, he told the 5 hunter clones to start the preparations for a small vegetable garden in the training ground. He gave them some money to buy the necessary tools and seeds as well. Even though hunting was a good way to get meat, he would most likely endanger the animals in the forest and they would migrate away. He figured that after some time, he could eventually persuade the guys in the market district to sell to him normally. This way he could also make some money by selling leftover vegetables and animal skins. After things settled down, he left to go to the Hokage tower. He purposefully went through the market district and went to Yui's shop. When he reached there, he felt his heart wrench painfully. A few people were gathered around the closed shop and trying to comfort a crying Yui. She was sitting next to the shop with her legs pulled in and her head tucked between them. Naruto went up to one of the people and called him. "Excuse me. What happened to Yui Nichin?" he asked one of them. The man turned to look at the 5-year-old, then frowned on seeing him, but sighed and told him the story. "You were here yesterday during that little incident, right?" Naruto nodded in response. "Well, it seems that Yui-chan's dad was scared of that ninja after winning his money, so he abandoned his daughter and left the village with a trade caravan. Yui-chan never knew her mother and now she's all alone. Poor kid. She's such a good girl and that bastard ruined her life. She doesn't deserve this," the man said while clenching his fists. By the time he heard the entire story, Naruto was glaring at the ground beneath him with his own fists clenched tightly. He took a deep breath and walked to the crying form of Yui. He went up and sat down in front of her with his legs folded. "Yui Nichin," he called out to her. The 10-year-old, 4.5 foot tall, dark green-haired girl twitched at his voice and slowly raised her face. Naruto's own eyes were on the verge of leaking tears at the sight of her weeping face. Despite only knowing her for a few hours and actually talking with her for even less than an hour, Naruto considered her as one of his precious people already and would protect her no matter what. Seeing her in this state made his body tremble ever so slightly. "I heard what happened, please calm down, Yui Nichin. It hurts me to see you crying like this," Naruto said to her in a shaky voice. As soon as Yui recognized a person in front of her, she immediately clung onto the 3.5 foot boy. She wept uncontrollably while holding him tightly. Daddy, he abandoned me to keep some money. He was the only family I had. What am I supposed to do now?" she asked him in between sobs. Naruto looked down, then rubbed her back gently while whispering soothingly in her ear, "It's okay, Nichin. It's okay. You still have me. I'll be your Otanto, younger brother, for you, and you'll be my Nichin. I won't let you be alone." She just nodded and tried to stifle her sobs. She then asked Naruto something he did not ever expect. Can you come and live with me?" she asked shakily. Everyone around heard it and they, as well as Naruto, widened their eyes in surprise. Naruto tried to look at her face, but she wouldn't let go of him and hence couldn't see her. He frowned to himself and tried to think a way out of the situation. If Naruto, the so-called demon brat, lives with a civilian, people would start gossip and things could possibly go downhill for him, as well as for Yui. Bad rumors would start spreading about her and she'd become a social outcast. Not to mention the fact that he only met her a day ago and things can't possibly go this fast. It would most probably turn out horribly for both of them in the end. Naruto tried to pry her off him but was unable to do so. He gulped and tried to talk her out of it. "Why Yui Nichin, I don't think that's a good idea. People would think that I'm taking advantage of you and talk about both of us badly." So it's Betty was cut off by Yui who furiously shook her head. No, it's not like that. You are a good and well-mannered boy, Naruto-kun. I see you as my Otanto and I know you wouldn't do anything bad. I won't let anyone say anything bad about you, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Naruto started sweating lightly at the situation he landed himself in. He shakily looked around to see the others' faces and what he saw surprised him. He expected to be glared at and whispered bad things about. But instead, the people around the two were frowning in thought. He saw some of them talking to each other about something, then all of them turned back to him. A minute later, a tall and muscled man came up to the two children on the ground and kneeled down on one leg. "Listen kid, I'll be honest with you. I accept that not all of us here are very happy with you. But all of us love Yui-chan a lot more than we dislike you. So on behalf of all of us," he bowed lightly to Naruto, "we ask you to keep her happy. And if that means she wants you to live with her, then we'll suck up our dislike of you and accept it. Please help her," he said, and the others also bowed their heads to him. Please keep in mind that they did not prostrate, instead they just bowed their heads. Naruto's eyes were bulging out of his head by now. The villagers who he knew to hate him from his birth actually bowed their heads to him in order to keep this girl happy. Something was wrong. Something was definitely wrong. Things were going too fast and it was unnatural. He had to find out what was going on. But before that, he needed to resolve the situation he was in at present. Naruto slowly pried Yui off of him and held her hands while looking at her face. "I understand, Yui Nichin. I will live with you from now on and I will be your Otanto. You are my Nichin from now on and I will keep you happy as a part of your family," he said, looking straight into her jade eyes with his own cerulean blue orbs. Yui's eyes lit up in happiness and she immediately glomped him again, with wet eyes but not crying. She closed her eyes and only one phrase kept coming from her soft lips, thank you." Naruto smiled and hugged her back as well. The people around them smiled at the sight of the two youngsters and Naruto rubbed her back soothingly until she fell asleep right on him. After laying Yui down to sleep in her house, which was conveniently right above the shop, and Naruto entered using the key in her pocket, Naruto asked one of the neighboring shopkeepers to tell her that he will come back in the evening after making his preparations. Naruto then left the area to go to the Hokage tower with a different objective in mind than before. His mood though was not as happy as expected, instead he was a bit concerned at this sense-defying development, thus he wouldn't be able to make the gravity seal with his current state of mind. Kami-chan, the violet-haired goddess, was sitting on the branch of a tree, watching the giant fox sleep peacefully when she heard her host's voice. "Yes. What do you need, Naruto-kun?" Naruto kept walking through the streets while continuing his mental conversation with his divine tenant. "What's going on, Kami-chan? Something's not right here. Just because I helped Yui Nichin once yesterday doesn't mean she'd become this attracted to me. I only met them yesterday, but the people in the market were even willing to put aside the matter with the fox and bow their heads to me. Now that I think of it, Ino-chan and the others also became familiar with me way too fast. I just don't get what's going on." The woman breathed out calmly and answered her host's worries. I know, Naruto-kun. I know that's not natural, and I also know why that's happening as well. Naruto widened his eyes. Really? So why is it then? You see, when I entered your mind that day to stay here, I unconsciously let a very tiny bit of my energy slip into your chakra stream. Usually my aura has many properties like attraction, calming and in some cases healing. The energy that mixed with your chakra enhanced the very source of your chakra itself, and now it has an unnoticeable aura of attraction. Luckily enough, the energy wasn't enough to produce very significant effects, and hence you are only a little bit more attractive than your usual self. So what I'm saying is it's not a big deal and people will like you a little bit more. That's all. Naruto took a deep breath and exhaled. Well, I won't say no to people liking me better. I don't exactly like the glares sent my way anyway. Though I do hope people remain normal to an extent. Hey wait. If what you say is true, why did that drunk guy attack me that day? Because he was drunk. Point noted. Is there any real problem with this then? The goddess tapped her chin in thought, then shook her head. No. I don't think there's any problem. Naruto nodded in reply. Good then. Thank you, Kami-chan. You're welcome, Naruto-kun. Naruto reached the Hokage tower at around 11 in the morning and asked the secretary for an appointment with the Hokage. The woman simply nodded and went off to the office. She returned a minute later and told him to go ahead, which he did after bowing to the lady. She went back to her desk thinking she's never going to get used to that. Naruto entered the office to see the Hokage was standing beside the window with his pipe, watching over the village. He then turned and greeted the blonde. Good day, Naruto-kun. What is it that you need today? Naruto inhaled deeply and exhaled. I want permission to move to a new place, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen noticed the use of his formal title and understood that this was a serious matter. He took a puff from his pipe, then went and sat on his seat. Explain. He said in a serious voice. Naruto nodded and explained the situation to him. Yui's father abandoning her clinging onto Naruto as a lifeline, the people themselves requesting him to help her and his own political view of the situation. The old Hokage took in every detail of the story and kept nodding. He was more surprised with the boy's forethought regarding the civilian side of the council, but managed to hide it nonetheless. So, in my opinion, it's better to get the support of a large number of civilians first and then inform the council of the situation, if at all needed. Though personally, I think it's better if you don't say anything at all until they find out themselves. This would most probably not cause too many problems for you, and they can't say anything because you'd already have the support of the people by then. The boy concluded. The Hokage rubbed his chin in thought, then nodded. He took a paper from a shelf along with a brush and ink, then wrote something on the paper. After finishing, he channeled some of his chakra into it, then handed the paper to the boy. Naruto read through the nearly blank document which only had some words at the top and bottom, which basically said that the signatures in the sheet attest to supporting him in moving in with the civilian Manami Yui, along with the Hokage's own signature at the top of the blank list. Naruto looked up from the document in his hands and saw the Hokage smiling at him. Naruto-kun, you go and get as many signatures as you can from the civilians, and I will let you do what you want. Naruto nodded and looked at the sheet again, then decided to try his luck. Hokage-sama, could you give me some more of these? He asked, gesturing at the sheet. The Hokage shrugged and made 2 more of those documents and gave them to the boy. The blonde got up from his seat, then bowed to the village leader and left the office. Hiruzen went back to the window and looked down at the village. This is an interesting development. Though it is wrong of me to use that poor girl like this, one of 2 things will happen in regards to this situation. Either the villagers will claim that Naruto threatened and did something to the people supporting him, or they will come to understand that he isn't a bad child and treat him better. I strongly hope that the latter would occur. He thought and took another puff from his pipe. The moment Naruto got out of the tower, he dashed to the market district, skillfully avoiding all human obstacles in his path. He then spent the rest of his day collecting as many signatures as he could from the people there. Not so surprisingly, word had already spread about the situation. What was surprising was that a lot of people knew Yui. She was a happy girl who used to work at the vegetable shop for a year along with her father. Many people had a soft spot for her and hence they wanted to help her any way they could. Naruto skipped lunch and playing with his friends today and instead tried to get as many people to sign the document as he could. Around 6:30 in the evening, Naruto returned to the Hokage's office and gave him the documents. Hiruzen took the documents from the blonde and glanced over them. He widened his eyes and turned to the blonde, who was grinning widely and shrugged. He turned back to the sheets and quickly counted the number of signatures. Ami, the old Hokage breathed out. Yes. The goddess replied happily. Naruto chuckled and shook his head. So, can I move now then? The old Hokage nodded dumbly. Yes of course, Naruto-kun. With this many, even the civilian council can't say anything. Naruto grinned happily, then ran towards the door. Well then, see you later, Jai-chan. He said waving his arm and went out of his office. Here is inside and put the documents in a secure file, then walked back to the window. Looks like people may see his true nature after all. Naruto was walking home with a big smile on his face when he remembered the clones he put for training in the morning. He facepalmed himself and ran to his training ground. There he saw that all 40 of his clones were practicing calligraphy. He ordered them to dispel 5 at a time as he got into a meditative position under a tree. Once all of them were done, he found out that the clones that were doing chakra-consuming exercises, namely control and sparring, stopped and went to calligraphy to not get dispelled after using up all of their chakra. Practicing handwriting consumed their chakra at a slower pace, and hence they did that in order not to waste any training time. This helped to refine his handwriting a lot more than usual, and with some experimentation, he found that it was good enough to be able to make some higher level seals like security seals. With regards to the vegetable garden, he learned that his clones made all the necessary preparations except planting the seeds themselves. They even built a makeshift fence for the time being. He went back to his apartment and began packing all the things he would need in his new abode. What he realized was that there weren't that many things he would need except his genjutsu supplies, training equipment, cooking ingredients, cup ramen, the newly bought stuff and his clothes and toothbrush. After everything was packed in his storage scrolls, he stuffed them into a bag and took one last look at his apartment. Even in the past and now, it was a pretty dirty place which he never bothered to clean up. He locked the door and walked off to his new place with his new sister. It was 8:15 by the time he reached his new home and he knocked on the door. A few soft footsteps neared the door from the other side while Naruto's heart started beating faster. In a few seconds, the door opened and Naruto finally took a good full view of his new sister. Lanami Yui was a 10-year-old, 4.5-foot tall girl with jade eyes. She had a little longer than shoulder-length dark green hair covering her ears, with 2 straight bangs framing her cute face up to the chin. She had bright tan skin and was wearing a white one-piece dress which reached her knees, whose bottom half consisted of green leaf patterns. She had a curious expression on her face which soon turned into happiness. "Naruto-kun. You came," she said gleefully. Naruto instead pouted in response. "Of course I did. I promised my Nichin that I would." Yui giggled and let her new Otanto in, which Naruto gratefully accepted. Though he was here once in the morning, he now took a good look around the house. It was a fairly spacious house with a large living room, a kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom and a small balcony. The living room had a good-sized couch along the far right wall from the main door. In front of it was a coffee table, and along the walls beside the couch were some shelves with decorative figures and flower vases and a few bookshelves. To the left of the door was the dining room which simply had a dining table for 4 and some extra chairs. The kitchen counter took the place of one side of the room, whereas the far left wall opened up with doors to a small balcony overlooking the streets. The kitchen was modest with counters and a number of cupboards, a sink and a refrigerator. Along the hallway in the middle of the rear part of the house were 1 door on the left in the far back and 2 doors on the right. The first half of the left hallway was open to lead to the kitchen, and the second was the door to the smaller bedroom, which had a small 2-person bed with other simple furniture. The first door on the right was that of the main bedroom with a large queen-sized bed with white pillow and mattress and jade covers. Along with the bed were 2 bedside tables, shelves, wardrobes, mirrors and a table with drawers. The last door on the right was a simple bathroom with a spacious shower, a washstone and an enclosed toilet. After seeing the entire house, only one thought raced through Naruto's mind. Was Yui's dad retarded? He must have been. There's no other explanation. Apparently, the goddess in his mind was thinking the same thing. Yeah, I mean come on. This place is like a king's palace compared to my apartment. Who in their right mind would abandon this place for a little bit of money? Yes, this house would probably cost about 1.5 million ryo. But still, no one would give this up and a daughter for a few 100,000 ryo. Maybe there were circumstances we don't know about. That or he's stupid. Naruto summed up and the goddess shrugged in reply. Kurama was still in the middle of a day-long nap and didn't notice anything. Naruto proceeded to walk to the smaller bedroom before Yui called out to him. "Naruto-kun, wait, could you maybe?" The blonde turned back and looked at his sister questioningly. The girl fidgeted at her spot with a red face until the young boy questioned her. "What's wrong, Yui Nichin?" "Could you?" She took a deep breath and looked at the blonde. "Could you move into the same room as me? I probably won't be able to sleep easily for a few days without daddy, so." Naruto looked at the girl for a second, then blinked. He turned around and went for the main bedroom instead. "Sure, Nichin," he said with a quiet voice which she heard anyway. But she still couldn't see the slight shade of red the boy's face had gained. After unpacking his things and settling in, Naruto suggested that the two of them go and eat dinner at Ichiraku Ramen, which Yui had no real problem with, though she wasn't particularly fond of the food item either. And so, they finished their meal at Ichiraku's with Naruto eating 10 bowls, compensating for skipping lunch. Yui finished her 2 bowls by the time Naruto had finished 8, mainly because she was awed at seeing a 5-year-old gorge through them so fast. Carefully avoiding some teasing from AM and paying the bill, they both returned home at around 10 and went straight for bed, exhausted from the day's activities. Both of them shared the same bed and pulled on the covers. Naruto was too distracted by the feeling of sleeping in a comfortable bed after 10 days to even notice the blush on his sister's face. Eventually, he calmed and let sleep overtake him, but not before saying one last thing in the night to his sister. "Good night, Yui-nichan." Yui stared at the boy, then smiled and touched her forehead to his and closed her eyes. "Good night, my Otanto, Naruto-kun," she said, and both drifted off into sleep. In another house, a platinum blonde-haired girl suddenly sat up straight on her bed and stared off into space. "Why do I get the feeling that something I don't like is going on?" she asked no one in particular and went back to sleep again. Meanwhile, a fair distance from Konoha. "So, are we done?" asked a person in merchant garbs. "Like hell we are. We told you to get the girl, not this faddis," said another crude-looking person. "What's so special about the girl anyway?" "Ha! What do you know? That girl has a special body that no one except this faddis and the boss knows. He said that if she's given the right training, she'd be very useful for our group. The faddis found out about our plans and ran away with the girl. We looked for them for a year and found she was here, Konoha, of all places. So what do we do then? You go back and get the girl while we take care of this idiot. PFF. He thought he could buy us off with some pocket change. Huh? What about our payment? You don't get any payment until you bring the girl. Damn you, if I wasn't about to go bankrupt because of low sales, I'd never associate with the likes of you. Yeah? Well, you are, and you don't have any choice. Now go get the girl and we'll talk about your precious payment," the crude man said while the other went off. The man walked over and removed a sword from a suspicious-looking mass of flesh on the ground. "Oh, get over here. Take whatever he's got and throw his body into a ditch. Get going." Two more men came and started looting the body of any valuables. They then carried the body to a natural ditch and threw it there and walked off dusting their hands. The body, which was now lying in the pit, could be seen having a tightly wound chain around his fist. Connected to the chain was an open locket with a photo of a 30-year-old man and a 9-year-old girl standing in front of a vegetable shop, smiling happily. A normal dawn on a normal Konoha. The giant faraway ball of fire that was the sun was slowly making its way above the horizon, warming the lands and awakening them from a night of silent rest. It was nearing 6 in the morning while the environment began coming to life. Yui's eyes fluttered open as she took in the obvious signs of waking up from sleep in the morning. Chirping sounds, check. Rays of light, check. Hazy eyes, check. Moving snoring teddy bear in her arms, check. Yui looked down to her arms to see that they were wrapped around a young boy with sun-kissed blonde hair and 3 whisker marks on each cheek, who was snuggling himself in her arms, unconsciously enjoying the warmth from the girl and the long mist-soft mattress. The girl froze as the memories and events from the previous day came rushing to her head. She stared at the peaceful sleeping face of her new Otanto with her red face, while a smile etched its way onto her face. Slowly, she released him and got up from bed, taking care not to wake up the boy so early in the morning for no reason. She stood on her feet and stretched her arms. The girl took one more glance at the young blonde and went to start the morning rituals. Yui brushed her teeth while gazing into her face in the mirror. She noticed the dullness in her own eyes, but ignored it. She then saw the reflection of a rather chubby man walk across behind her while yawning. Yui widened her eyes and snapped her head backwards to see nothing. The emerald-haired girl stared at the blank wall behind her, then sighed through her nostrils and turned around, spit into the sink and cleaned herself up, then proceeded into the shower. She imagined the face of the blonde boy she knew and smiled unknowingly. But the more she thought of her very few memories with him, the more she remembered the face of the person who came to be the cause of him living with her. The bureau. The girl thought of him as her own father. She thought it weird that he didn't have any surname while she did. Bureau had told Yui a few years ago that he had adopted her as his own daughter when he had found her as a 3-year-old, unconscious outside of a wrecked building. He had told her that he knew her parents from a few meetings with them, but never went into detail. Yui, being the innocent child that she was, never questioned him further since she didn't need to know about them back then because she had Bureau already. Her memories with him were all happy ones, with the both of them smiling and laughing without a care in the world. Though she had some memories that she didn't understand too well. Mainly the times when her father was sometimes on edge and the both of them relocated somewhere else shortly afterwards. 1 year ago, he was significantly nervous and fidgety before he suddenly decided that they would migrate to Konoha. The months thereafter were some of the best times of her life as she got to work alongside her father, met many new people, made lots of friends with the people around their vegetable shop and such. Then came the memory of him leaving her without even telling her that he was going somewhere. She was shocked, to say the least, when the people told her that he had abandoned her for some money he won from a card game. Afterwards she had a near mental breakdown and descended into a sobbing fit in front of the shop when the boy from the previous day came and tried to cheer her up, which led to him agreeing to become her younger brother and live with her for her own selfishness. Yui sighed as she felt the warm water hit her skin one last time before turning off the shower and grabbing a towel. She shook her head clear of any depressing thoughts and focused on what to do from now on. She now had a new member in her house and she had to work twice as hard to sustain her family without her father around anymore. She got dressed quickly and put on the locket her father had bought for himself and her. And with fire in her eyes, she set off to work. Naruto slowly opened his eyes and blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling. It was 8 in the morning with the sounds of a few people going on about their businesses reaching Naruto's ears. Immediately recalling the past events, he turned to the side only to see an empty spot on the white mattress. He sprawled on the bed, stretching his limbs, then got up. He went out of the room and into the main hall. He looked around but could not find his new elder sister. He closed his eyes and formed an unnoticeable chakra field of around a 50-meter radius. Naruto, the former 7th Hokage, had a very wide range of skills which also included sensory abilities. He wasn't exactly a prodigy in the art, but he was among the upper ranks of sensors on his own. With a tiny bit of Kurama's chakra, he was easily the best sensor in the village, with a range equivalent to 1.5 of Konoha. The only one who could possibly match him would have been Karen with her godly range of 10 kilometers or more. Granted, Naruto could still improve his own with more chakra and concentration. Back to the point, Naruto only made a small search field because he somewhat had an idea of where Yui would be and he didn't want to strain his body first thing in the morning. In a few seconds, he locked onto the faint but familiar chakra signature he was looking for. He just stayed like that, sensing it go back and forth between a cart-like object and the store. He guessed that she was restocking the shop with fresh vegetables and opened his eyes. He walked out of the door and down the stairs, cracking his knuckles for a workout. Humming down the stairs, he walked right up to Yui who put down a box of cabbages in the shop. She saw him coming and formed a smile. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," Yui Nichin. They both blinked at each other and chuckled. Yui got ready to head out to the cart again when Naruto grabbed her hand. She turned to him with a curious glance. "Let me help you, Nichin," said the boy while the girl just smiled and shook her head. "I appreciate the thought, Naruto-kun. But these may be a bit too heavy for you," she said, gesturing towards the cart. Naruto smirked and ran to the cart. He grabbed and lifted a relatively smaller box of carrots with a huff. Yui just stared wide-eyed as she watched her 5-year-old brother carry the box slowly to the shop and put it down. Naruto wiped some sweat from his forehead and grinned at her before running back to the cart. Yui wasn't about to let her outshine her, so she also got to work. What the girl didn't know was that Naruto was reinforcing his muscles with chakra to be able to lift the boxes. 5 minutes later, both of them set down the last box of onions and stood up. They glanced at each other, panting heavily after the box relocation event. Well, that was a good morning exercise. Naruto breathed out as he took a deep breath and straightened up almost instantly. "I'm impressed that you were able to lift those, Naruto-kun," Yui said, not as exhausted as her brother, but tired nonetheless. Naruto gave her his trademark foxy grin as he sniffed himself. He grimaced at his body odor as he started walking back up the stairs. Yui shook her head with a smile and got to work on arranging the vegetables on the shelves. After a shower and dressing himself in his usual white t-shirt and black shorts, Naruto came to the dining room just as he saw Yui enter. Yui just smiled at him while she washed her hands and then began making some egg and bread toast. Naruto gave her some minor help in between, which didn't surprise her that much since he had told her that he lived alone and she had assumed he knew some basic dishes, as strange as that would be for a 5-year-old. During the meal at the dining table, Yui turned to Naruto and asked him a certain thing that was on her mind. "Naruto-kun, what did you used to do all day when you were living alone?" Naruto swallowed a piece and went for some water. "Not much really. Since I want to be Hokage, I just spend my time training. If not, then I spend time with Jai-chan and my other friends." Yui nodded at that while taking another bite, then put on a confused face. "But then, what did you do for the bills and food?" "Jai-chan gives me an allowance every week. About 6,000 to 8,000 ryo, and I use that to pay the monthly bills and for food." Yui finished her meal just as Naruto finished his, and she asked him, "So what are you going to do today?" Naruto chugged down a glass of water and slammed it down on the table as he raised his arms into the air, training. He shouted before running to the door and put on his sandals. He ran out the door shouting, "Bye, Nichin." While Yui giggled at his antics and set to cleaning the table before going to work herself. Naruto reached his private training ground as he quickly created 50 shadow clones and put them to work. His control had gotten much better than before and coupled with the morning's exercise, made for an extra 10 clones. But it was still a speck of dust compared to his record of 5,000 clones, but it was slowly but surely improving. He put 15 clones on chakra control, 10 on taijutsu adjustment, 15 on kunai and shuriken adjustment, 8 on calligraphy and 2 on food retrieval. He told the last 2 to plant the seeds in the garden first, then go find some wild fruits for lunch. And before long, he realized that he had left the seeds, practice weapons and genjutsu equipment back at the house. He facepalmed himself, then instructed the last 25 to split between the other exercises while he got ready to make a marathon sprint to the house, then dashed out of the training ground at speeds that would put a normal cat to shame. Note: Tora is not a normal cat. Zipping past the crowd, he reached the shop house and was about to go up the stairs when he noticed a merchant talking to Yui inside the shop. Normally, this wouldn't be that unusual and people would ignore it. But Naruto observed his body language and his tense stance and couldn't help but be suspicious. Light paranoia is a ninja's friend in this world after all. Heightening his hearing with some chakra, he shamelessly eavesdropped on the conversation. "So, how about it, miss?" "I'm not sure, sir. I mean, we already have the usual supply for us, so we don't really need new stock." "Please don't say such things, miss. Our products are all imported from other countries. You need only come to our caravan near the village gates and pick out the stock." "But you can come whenever you're free, miss. It's rather crowded there during the day as well. I'll be waiting there for you." He bowed to her and walked out of the shop. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man and made 2 shadow clones. One hinged into a random villager while the other climbed up to the roof. Both of them followed the man quietly as he went off. It wasn't bad for him to ever be too careful. Naruto looked at Yui to see that she went back to work with the other customers. He figured that it's better safe than sorry, so he made another shadow clone who hid himself with a good view of both the shop and the stairs to the house. The original went up to the house and quickly grabbed his equipment and dashed off with one last glance at his sister. Quite pissed off that he's not getting the right mood to be able to make the gravity seal, he was a bit reckless in the day's physical training. He pushed himself beyond his limits and ultimately ended up with a totally exhausted body by 2 in the afternoon. He tiredly ate some fruits and walked off lazily. The clones looked at the original go off and talked with each other. "Man, the boss is pretty stupid to use up all his energy in the morning. You know, you just called all of us stupid, including yourself." "No, he called him stupid. Not all of you." "Huh? So you're telling us all of us are stupid except you? You bastards." "No, damn it. Damn fine. You're all stupid." "What? Come here." And so, a brawl fest erupted in the training ground for no apparent reason. Naruto gained the memories from a dispelled clone and sweat dropped. "What are those idiots doing?" "Naruto-kun, you do know that you just called yourself an idiot, right?" "No, screw it." The goddess just chuckled at her host's actions. "Yo guys. Long time no see." Naruto said as he walked into the park as Ino, Shikamaru, Chimjai and Sakura looked towards the incoming blonde. "Naruto." Ino said as she got up excitedly, but then folded her arms and pouted childishly, "Where have you been the last few days?" Naruto sat next to Shikamaru who was on the ground watching the clouds and nodded his head in greeting to him and Chimjai, who also nodded back. He waved to Sakura who did the same. He looked back to Ino and rubbed the back of his head, grinning sheepishly. "Well, you see, I was busy with some work for the past 2 days and some family problems." The others looked to each other and shrugged, then turned back to the blonde. "Okay. Now that you're here, let's play." Naruto looked at the sky and sighed while laying down next to Shikamaru. "I'm sorry, Ino-chan. I just came here today to see you guys. Right now, playing is just too troublesome." He said while Ino gaped at him and Shikamaru smirked. "I think I should sue you for that." He said while the blonde snorted. After half an hour of watching clouds of various shapes and sizes move lazily across the sky without a care in the world, Naruto and Shika opted to play their daily match of Shingai, which ended in Naruto's victory as usual, with their game time bumped up to 40 minutes. Next he played against Sakura, who desperately wanted a match with him. Naruto agreed with a shrug and played. They finished in 15 minutes with his victory, while Sakura gaped at the board. She demanded another match which Naruto didn't care about, so accepted, and he obviously won as well, which led to her demanding more rematches every time she lost. Right when they were about to rearrange the pieces for another match, Naruto received the memories of one of the clones from the merchant spy team. Upon processing them, he sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Why does trouble follow me wherever I go? Makes me wonder how we went through a decade without any major problems." "That's a mystery for the ages," replied his inner goddess. "Hami-chan. I'm too old for this crap." "Naruto-kun, you're 5 years old." "Then I'm too young for this crap." The goddess shook her head with a smile while Kurama snorted. Half of your life was crap. The other half was boring as hell." No comment. "Man, I can't even spend time with my friends," he said mentally and got up. "Sorry guys, I have some more work to do at my house, so I'll see you tomorrow," he said tiredly and went off waving goodbye. The 4 watched him go, with some of them feeling confused and some feeling pity. Naruto kind of looks like an old man who's really tired. I wonder what happened to him. Ino wondered aloud while Shika just shrugged and went back to his usual hobby. As soon as the park was out of sight, Naruto kicked the ground and dashed full speed back to the shop. On the way, he received the memory of the clone guarding Yui. He learned that she closed the shop early and was walking towards the gate to meet the trader. He grit his teeth and pushed himself to run faster. While running, he got an idea and quickly cut through an empty alley and continued running. A second later, another Naruto emerged from the alley and went towards the Hokage tower. Flashback, the two shadow clones, one on the ground as a random villager and one on the rooftops, followed the trader through the streets as he came to a restaurant. The two just observed him from outside stealthily until he came back out after a while and started walking again. They finally reached the caravan he had mentioned just within the south gate. The two kept watch on him for a few hours and noticed that the place was not very crowded as the trader had made it out to be. A few people would glance at them, but only rare few went and actually bought anything. Around 4 in the afternoon, they noticed that the trader seemed to be very impatient. He was either pacing back and forth or tapping his foot. The clones decided to go take a closer look. When the trader was in range, both of them enhanced their hearing and listened to him. "That brat. How long is it going to take her to come? Be it her father or her, they just keep people waiting. Heh. I'm glad the idiot got killed. He dared to keep me waiting, he had it coming for him. But I wish I'd gotten the money from him instead of those stupid thugs. I'd have put it to much better use. Did I at least get the payment? And oh, you bring the girl, and then you get payment," he says. The bastard. Acting like he's all that just because he had a sword in his hands. "What's the big deal with that ability he says the girl has anyway? Damn it. Where's that brat already? I hate waiting." The two clones widened their eyes and glanced to each other. The villager clone nodded and quickly slipped from the crowd. The roof clone continued to keep watch on the situation, hoping to learn more. The other went into an alley and immediately dispelled himself, sending his memories to the original. Clouds were beginning to move in, and the sky was darkening. At around 5, Naruto reached the south gate where he knew the caravan was. Just as he reached there, he quickly and stealthily jumped into one of the carts and hid behind some crates. He hurried to silence his heavy breaths and channeled chakra to his ears while creating a sensor field along the length of the caravan. Naruto sensed and heard his sister with the trader talking business while walking towards the same cart he was in, which also happened to be the last of the 3 carts. Upon reaching, the people around her gagged her mouth and tied her up while pushing her into the cart. He sensed them hurry off back to the front while one of them climbed into the cart to watch the girl. But before the caravan could start moving, Naruto made his move as he strangled the man's neck from behind him with a nearby rope. The man was knocked out relatively fast since he wasn't a ninja. Naruto wondered about his chakra levels, but then found a memory of his clones, dispelling the moment the spy clone dispelled, sending some chakra back to the original. So with no hesitation, he made a shadow clone who quickly grabbed Yui and jumped out of the cart. The clone from earlier that was keeping watch over the operation from the rooftop nodded and dispelled. The Naruto holding Yui hurried back to the house. Meanwhile inside the cart, Naruto was looking around for something to write with as the caravan started to move out of the village at a not so normal pace. Not finding anything he could use, he crushed a tomato from one of the crates and used its liquid to quickly draw a chakra pulse seal at a concealed position and channeled an insignificant amount of chakra into it. A single paragraph description of the chakra pulse seal below. Skip if not interested. The chakra pulse seal simply lets out a barely noticeable short chakra wave periodically, which lingers at the spot for a few minutes. With a catalyst like tomato liquid, the strength of the wave is horribly low, but it gets the job done. This seal would have been useful in throwing off pursuers, if only it didn't take super high-grade ink to even be able to near the level of an actual distraction. As it is, it's better used to create a trail for an ally to pick up on and follow. This is because not many people are talented enough to sense actual movement of chakra instead of residue. So far, Naruto only knew Karen to be able to do that. Naruto could have used his own blood to do the seal, but it would be unstable right now. He was also taking precautions to not alert the possible rescue team to his genjutsu skills. Though with the situation he was currently in, he could care less. Once the caravan went out of sight of the village gate, it picked up the pace drastically and was going pretty fast now. The reason why Naruto was even in the caravan was because he wanted to find the root of this issue and end it to make sure they wouldn't come for Yui again. Naruto noticed the man from earlier groan and start to wake up. So the boy quickly made another clone who henjed himself into the tied-up form of an unconscious Yui while Naruto hid himself. The man woke up and noticed the girl still tied up and asleep. He rubbed his neck which was oddly itchy and scratched his head, seemingly having forgotten something, but then shrugged and leaned onto the cart wall. Meanwhile, Hokage Tower. The third Hokage paced around the room with worry obvious on his face as he heard a knock from the door. He went back to his seat and allowed them to enter. Two people came into the office and bowed respectfully to their village leader. The old Hokage nodded and started. "I believe that both of you know about Uzumaki Naruto-kun, yes?" He asked them as both nodded. "Have you heard about his new abode as well then?" He asked and they nodded again. "Then I will get straight to the point. His sister Minami Yui had been kidnapped by some men posing as a trade caravan near the south gate. But luckily, Naruto-kun managed to get her out before they left the village." He said as he noticed one of the men's shoulders slump slightly in relief. "However, my informant told me that the boy himself took her place by disguising himself as his sister in order to get to the root of the situation and take care of it." He continued as both of the men widened their eyes. "Now, your mission is to find this caravan and rescue Uzumaki Naruto from them. Once that is done, you will learn more about the situation and find a way around it while eliminating any threats to the boy as well as any other citizen of this village. Is that understood?" He said in an authoritative voice to which both of them nodded in seriousness. This is an A-rank mission due to the possible threat to the village and also because of the importance of the boy to this village. Once accomplished, bring the boy with you to my office. Dismissed. He said, and the two men bowed to him once more before disappearing in puffs of smoke. The old Hokage went to the window and looked towards the south gate as he noticed the two men from before racing across the rooftops at high speeds. "Stay safe, Naruto-kun. You are not in the future right now, so you are not as strong. I trust that you will not do anything more foolish than what you already have and take steps not to get yourself killed. Help is coming, Naruto-kun. You need only wait." The third Hokage thought to himself as he went back to his work. Outside Konoha South Gate, the two men were racing beside the road looking for any clue of the caravan. Then they stopped as both of them glanced at each other. "Do you feel that as well?" one of them asked while the other nodded. "A faint chakra presence going along the road. It's getting weaker by the second," the other said. The boy must have either been scared or was purposefully flaring his chakra intensely along the path. The first said. "Doesn't matter. Let's follow it quickly before it disappears. Well, even if it does disappear, there are some tracks on the road anyways." Both of them nodded and continued dashing along the faint trail of chakra. The caravan had stopped after 2 hours of travel and the trader from before had pulled Yui Naruto clone out of the cart. The two of them walked through the forest while Naruto erased the chakra pulse seal and followed them from above via tree branches. He watched his clone put up mock struggles every now and then to create more trail clues. Finally they reached a clearing where 3 people who seemed to be bandits were waiting. The trader pushed Yui to the middle one of the 3 who smirked and tossed him a pouch, presumably full of money. The trader caught it and examined its contents before smiling. He and the bandit leader made small talk for a minute, then both of them left their own ways. Naruto followed the bandits as they crossed a narrow stream and continued through the forest. It was 7:30 with dark skies and occasional drops of rain when they reached a cave entrance which was hard to notice because of the shape of the cliff face. They all continued inside while Naruto decided to put more distance between them and followed inside. The cave was around 10 feet wide and the ceiling was high enough to stack 2 people vertically. The walls were of plain rock and the tunnel was fairly dark as well. But besides that, it looked like a completely normal cave with wouldn't arouse any suspicion. After a few twists and turns, the cave opened up to a bigger and more populated area. There were lots of crates and bags around, seemingly making counter-high walls between compartment-like spaces. There were also some tents with beds and futon in them. A few campfire-like flames were around, but most were unlit. There was a makeshift bar at a spot surrounded by more crates which served as tables and chairs. There was a torch in each space, and people were either sleeping, drinking, chatting, arguing or playing cards. An stereotype warning. And maybe pedophile warning maybe P. Naruto quickly took to sticking to the high ceiling of the cave rather than the ground, since the ceiling was not well lit like below and was pretty dark. He watched a 4 from earlier cut through the path and go to the more open back space. The men around them were grinning lecherously at the girl, and some were even drooling. Yui herself was disgusted by the environment and silently cursed her boss for making her go through this. She was a 9-year-old, damn it. They went up to a man who was laying with his legs propped up on a crate until he saw the 3 men and 1 girl come, which prompted him to put down his legs and sit up in a hunched fashion. The probable boss of the bandit group was wearing a mesh shirt below a half-torn, ragged and open Konoha vest. He was wearing black ragged pants and boots. He had a bandana tied to his head and covering his hair. There was a dirty pouch tied to the right of the waist with some kunai poking out of it. The man was around 5'10", moderately fit and in his 30s. Finally, he had a hit I-8 with a slashed Konoha symbol around his left bicep. At the moment, he also had a smug grin on his face. "Here's the girl, boss. We paid the guy his money since I thought he might be useful to us in the future," the bandit in the middle said, pushing Yui forward while the leader grinned more and got up from his seat. "A job," he said simply and stood in front of the trembling girl. He looked down at her and smirked. "Nice to meet ya, girlie. Minami Yui, is it?" He asked while the girl nodded shakily. Let me tell you the name of your new owner. My name is Kurikage Hadashi. I'm a C-rank missing nin from Konoha. Do you know why I've had you brought here? He asked, to which the girl shook her head slowly. Naruto widened his eyes and quickly set up a sensor field excluding the missing nin. He didn't want to take any risks right now. He counted about 26 bandits in the cave excluding the leader. He gulped and looked back at the man. It's because you have a very unique condition in your body. He said in a lower voice and continued, you, girlie, have a weird condition where you have near godly chakra control. You can do anything related to chakra perfectly. But, you can only do that for a few seconds. It ain't that you have less chakra. This is because you don't actually use chakra. Instead you use your own body energy. Taking all the energy from your C-cell cells, whatever they're called. They suck you dry in a matter of seconds. He said while Yui looked at him confused. Did you know that your own parents are the people who did this to you? He asked as the girl widened her eyes while the man smirked. He paced around her slowly, taking a good look at her from all angles. The both of them were scientists of a kind. After you were born, they used you as a test subject. But you know that guy, Daburo. Yeah, your father as you call him. He used to be your caretaker. But 3 years after your birth, he became upset that you weren't even treated as a human. So he blew up the place. Everything, along with your parents. Then he adopted you and gave you the surname Minami, in respect to his dead lover or something, I don't really care. He said, and looked amused at the girl whose lower lip was quivering and eyes wide. When I found out about your existence, I did everything I could to find you and make you mine. But the bastard Daburo was the most slippery guy I've ever met. He avoided me for 6 years. Ha. Bravo to him. But then I came particularly close to getting you 1 year ago. But he again slipped away with you. I looked around for 9 months, then I found out you were in Konoha. The man told the girl, who was sniffling lightly. But do you know what he did after that? He gave up. Yesterday, he came to my boys and tried to pay them to stay away from him and you. Of course, I wouldn't do that and neither would my boys, so he got a blade to his chest instead. We still kept the money though. Hey ha ha ha. He laughed at the slowly sobbing girl. Now do you know why I wanted you? It's because with godly chakra control such as yours, you can serve me 2 purposes. 1, you can become the equivalent of a first aid kit for our group. 2, I can use you to improve my own power. You can just tune up my entire system and make me as strong as the Hokage in only a few hours. Your stupid energy problem can be solved with a few drugs. Though I can't say you'll be alive at the end of it. Heh. The man said with a smirk. So let's get you all settled in, shall we? He said in his normal loud voice and made to stand tall in front of her with a smug grin on his face. Suddenly, Yui stopped crying and trembling while her eyes were shadowed by her bangs. The man raised an eyebrow at her before she raised her head to show her face to him. The man scowled at the sight in front of him. Before him was a tied-up emerald-haired girl with a pretty smile on her face looking at him. Zandon, too bad, she said cutely before she started to glow. The man widened his eyes and jumped back quickly just as the girl exploded violently, throwing the 3 bandits around her away from her. Then just as sudden, 5 small puffs of smoke appeared in separate parts of the cave and 5 more smaller explosions rocked the cave. An. Regarding that Japanese word, I only put it there for some people to imagine her in a cute way. Meh, just ignore it. The bandit leader, sensing some movement, immediately threw a kunai at a part of the ceiling, but the person dodged and dropped to the ground a few feet in front of him. Adachi got a good look at the figure in front of him. He was a child who was more or less 5 years old, had blonde hair and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. Simply said, he was a runt who didn't look the least bit dangerous, excluding the glare the boy held towards him. Adachi then smirked at the blonde. So all the stuff I said earlier was me talking to you, huh? He asked amused, while the blonde kept up his glare. Looks like you're pretty good, kid. Apparently you know Bunshin Daibakuha, clone grade explosion. Pretty damn good for a 5-year-old. But you ain't beating me with just that, brat. He said and dashed towards the boy. Adachi tried to punch the runt's face, but the blonde jumped and landed on his outstretched arm. Naruto kicked at the man's face who grabbed it with his free arm before it hit and threw the blonde down to the ground. Naruto grunted and immediately rolled away from a stomp. He thrust his leg out at the man's shin, but said man kicked back, pushing away the blonde's kick with his superior physical strength. Naruto flied away, but flipped and landed safely. He quickly ducked down, barely missing the kunai to his face, before he was sent flying away again by a leg to his side, which he only just blocked with his arms. He skidded on his feet across the ground, then held up a cross seal, making 2 shadow clones. Damn it. I'm beginning to hate being a kid. Naruto thought as he took a second to heal his bruises while sending the clones ahead. Adachi raised an amused eyebrow before blocking a punch to his face from a jumping clone while sidestepping to avoid the other. He back-kicked the clone, dispelling it as he grabbed the other and threw it towards the original. The clone dispelled itself in a puff of smoke just before it collided as a bottle came flying towards Hadashi through the smoke. The man caught it and threw it back at the smoke and heard it shatter on the ground. Naruto jumped out of the smoke with his right hand cocked back. Hadashi moved to intercept it before he noticed the slight blue glow on the boy's palm. The man widened his eyes while he crossed his arms in defense as the boy thrust his palm out. Dawn. Repshim, wind release. Gale palm, a strong wind erupted from Naruto's palm and sent the man flying. Hadashi grunted as he crashed through a crate and skidded on the ground on his back before he quickly rolled back into a standing position. He spit out some saliva with a tinge of red as he glared at the blonde, but then smirked. "You're good, kid. Far better than any damn 5-year-old I know. But not good enough. Damn. I can't believe I have to stay on guard against a brat. Now, well, I want to kick the snot out of you, my buddies here want to do the same thing," he said as the other bandits came between the two. One of them smirked and ran towards the boy with his sword raised high. Naruto narrowed his eyes and sidestepped the sloppy move while he jumped up and spun around, backheeling the man's face and sending him tumbling along the ground. The moment he landed, a kunai rushed through and struck his left shoulder. Naruto cursed his carelessness as he pulled out the kunai and gripped his shoulder, while Kurama's chakra already started healing the wound. He glared at the smirking bandits as they walked towards him, while Hadashi patted his kunai pouch and folded his arms, his usual smug grin back on his face. Naruto was in no position to fight right now. He may be strong and have super regeneration, but he was still a 5-year-old and was quickly running out of energy. He was panting heavily already and could only barely stand. "Kurama. How long can my body sustain a tailless cloak?" The fox frowned and replied to the blonde. 5 seconds. 10 seconds at the most. Then you'd probably go into a coma for a short while. Your physical body is still weak and can't handle that much power. Damn it. What do I do? Come on, come on, come on. What do I? Naruto stopped as he sensed a very familiar chakra enter his field. One of the bandits walked up to him as he held his axe high. "Game over, brat," he said as he swung it down. Valkyrie, lightning cutter, Naruto's super enhanced hearing, further enhanced by the current adrenaline in his body, barely heard the angry whisper that came from the entrance of the cave. In an instant of hearing it, a familiar loud crackling noise sounded throughout the cave as the bandit's weapon arm was ripped off by a bright bluish-white light and the bandit was sent flying into the cave wall by a leg. Naruto widened his eyes and looked in awe at the figure in front of him. Gray body armor, black anbu pants and black shinobi sandals, with a tantem strapped to the back. But most of all, two features immediately caught his eye. A dog mask and gravity-defying silver hair. No doubt about it. This was Kakashi, Kakashi. His old teacher and the man who became the 6th Hokage. His father's disciple and one of his most favored people. The man who took him and 2 others he knew very well as his students. This was Sharingan no Kakashi, Kakashi of the Sharingan. The dog-masked Anbu stood in front of the barely standing boy, facing to the side. He turned to the blonde and frowned at the blood from his shoulder. "You alright, Naruto?" he asked with a neutral voice, masking his worry. But the blonde knew that he was worried and was trying to hide it. He smiled inwardly at his actions. It made him happy to know that Kakashi was worried about him even if he was trying to hide it, but still slipped it by calling by his first name. But he pushed aside the thought and replied to the man. "Why yes, dog-san. A kunai hit my shoulder and it bled out a little, but it's getting better, kind of," Naruto said in between quick breaths, being careful not to reveal that he already knew about his tenant and his powers. The man nodded and turned to the crowd, while another man dropped down beside the two. Naruto turned his head and looked at the second arrival. The same Anbu armor with black pants and sandals, but with a weasel mask and black hair tied into a small ponytail. Naruto easily recognized him and was inwardly shocked to see him again alive. It was obvious, but it was still somewhat shocking. Itachi, Uchiha Itachi. The famed murderer of his own clan in the future and the prodigy of the clan in the present. Brother of Uchiha Sasuke and son of the current clan head, Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Mikoto. The second Sharingan user in the Akatsuki and once the object of his brother's hatred. The weasel-masked Anbu looked significantly younger than the one Naruto had seen in his time. Right now, he looked around 12 years old. He turned to the blonde and looked at the shoulder injury. He just stared at the boy's panting form from behind his mask. He then put his hand to his pouch and fished out a small pouch. He opened it and took out a pill and put away his pouch. He handed the pill to the blonde, who was just looking at him. "Soldier pill. Eat it. You'll feel a little less tired," he said to the boy. Naruto knew what it was already, though he just nodded and took it, then ate it. Naruto was channeling chakra through his entire body through the whole fight and hence he had lost quite a bit of chakra. Add a few flashy jutsu into the mix and you get an exhausted child as a result. In a few seconds, he felt a lot less tired and was at least in a position to run away now. Not that he would ever do that. The black-haired young man nodded to him, then turned to the bandit threat. Both of the Anbu were ready to engage before Naruto called out to them. Anbu-san, he called out to them together as they turned to look at the blonde. The leader of those bandits is a guy named Hokage Hadashi. He said he's a C-rank missing nin from Konoha and he's the guy that threw the kunai to my shoulder. Naruto said, pointing to the far back of the bandits. The two Anbu looked towards the back of the crowd and indeed saw the wanted bingo book bounty head glaring at the trio. Itachi the dog masked Anbu started but was cut off by the weasel masked Anbu. I know, Captain. I'll take out the legs, you go for the head. He said while the other nodded. The silver-haired man turned to the young blonde. Stay here, kid. He said while the blonde nodded, then went and took cover behind a crate wall. The two Anbu turned back to the bandit crowd and released their pent-up killing intent. The bandits all widened their eyes and started to tremble, and even Hadashi had a drop of sweat sliding down the side of his face at the intensity of the two. Don't think you're getting out of this alive. Both of them said in unison as Itachi dashed forward and punched the bandit nearest to him in the face as he jumped onto the shoulder of another and leaped into the air. He quickly formed some hand seals and took a deep breath. Pain. Gakukik no Jutsu, fire release. Great fireball technique. Barely a moment later, a giant fireball came rushing down towards the bandits. All of them panicked and tried to run away, but couldn't do that because of crowding the area so much. The fireball fell and devastated the majority of them, while a few were lucky enough to be on the edges of the crowd. Ultimately, more than half of them were burned alive, while the others got away with a few minor burns. With the way clear, Kakashi rushed into the fray, jumping over the burnt bodies as he went straight for the missing nin. Hadashi hastily threw a kunai at him and rushed forward behind it with another kunai in hand. Kakashi bent slightly to the side to avoid it, then locked blades with the bandit leader. Hokage Hadashi. C-rank missing nin of Konoha. Wanted for attempted theft of secret clan techniques. You are not going to live to see another day. The dog mask Anbu said ominously as both of them jumped back. Kakashi dashed forward the instant he touched the ground. Hadashi ducked and barely dodged his tantrum over his head but was unable to dodge the fast knee to his face. He stumbled backwards and hurriedly sidestepped the incoming thrust kick and threw his own high kick. Kakashi grabbed it with his free left arm and quickly stabbed it with his tantrum. Hadashi gave a small shout and threw his kunai at the Anbu's left arm as Kakashi released the leg and jumped to the side while Hadashi jumped back. The bandit leader crouched down and held his leg while glaring at his opponent. Meanwhile, Itachi was zipping across the space slashing and stabbing the remaining bandits, leaving none alive. Naruto almost gagged at the sight of burnt bodies and blood flying everywhere but covered his mouth and focused on the silver-haired man's fight instead. Hadashi tried to reach for a nearby sword but had to withdraw his hand to avoid a shuriken that came flying to it. He fell to the ground on his back to avoid another tantrum slash to his neck and thrust his leg towards his opponent's stomach. Kakashi blocked it with his left arm as he kicked it away with his right leg. Hadashi rotated on the ground due to the force and Kakashi stabbed his left shoulder with his tantrum. The victim screamed in pain as he thrashed around or tried to. He saw that his hands and legs were pinned to the ground by kunai and he screamed again from the collective pain. Kakashi looked at the bleeding shoulder and narrowed his eyes behind his mask. Shoulder, he twisted his blade in it and listened to the bandit leader's shouts. Kakashi stomped on his chest and silenced his screams. The dog mask Anbu turned his head to look at the missing nin's face and shifted the blade from the shoulder to his neck. Any last words? He asked ominously. Hadashi coughed and spit out some blood. He stopped his struggles and looked at his opponent, then turned to look at the blonde who was coming towards the two. Naruto stopped a small distance from them and looked at the bandit leader. Hadashi stared at him for a few seconds, then turned his head to look straight at the ceiling of the cave. I've been chasing that girl for 6 years. Her dad was always on edge and the both of them couldn't ever live normally thanks to me. He said and noticed the boy clenching his fist. Kid, if you meet the girl tell her this. He closed his eyes and spoke in a soft voice. You're free. Naruto stared at the man, loosening his fist, then took a deep breath. I will. Kakashi glanced at the blonde and saw that he was watching the scene intently. He breathed out and then cut through the man's neck. Naruto grimaced at the sight, then closed his eyes and turned away with a gulp. He turned around and walked towards Itachi, who had finished gathering all the valuables in the cave and storage scrolls and was preparing to leave. The silver-haired man cauterized the bleeding neck and quickly stored the head in a storage scroll. He used a small fire jutsu to burn the body and walked back to the other two. Coming out of the cave, they saw that it was now raining heavily. They decided to wait until the rain lessened a bit. Naruto asked the two Anbu on what happened to the trade caravan, to which they told him that they were already gone by the time the two arrived. They had noticed a sudden stop in the chakra trail and found evidence of a struggle leading through the forest instead. So they had followed the trail to the cave where they arrived just in time to help him. Nearly an hour later, the rain turned into a drizzle, so they decided to head back. Though when they turned to the boy, they found him asleep leaning to the wall. Both of them glanced at each other and Itachi asked Kakashi to do the honors, to which he snorted and walked to the boy and kneeled down. Kakashi realized then that he could finally do one of the things he wanted to do for 5 years. He removed his mask and pulled up his headband to reveal his blood-red eye with 3 black tomo surrounding a black pupil. He extended his hand towards the boy and patted the boy's head gently. Kakashi never had the time to spend time with his sensei's son ever since his death and the boy's birth. So now that he had the chance to do so, he wanted to make the most of it without disturbing the boy from his sleep and burn the moment into his memory with his Sharingan. His hand slid down the young blonde's face and caressed his cheek as his expression softened. Naruto unconsciously leaned into the touch and smiled slightly in his sleep. A lone tear went down Kakashi's cheek from his own eye as he rubbed it away and pulled down his headband over his left eye. He put on his mask again and gently picked the boy up and put him to his back, wrapping his arms and legs around his own body. He took out and put on his white cloak over the boy as Itachi put on his own. Unknown to the two Anbu, Naruto and his goddess were observing the entire thing from the mindscape, sitting on the grass with their legs outstretched and hands beside them on the grass. Naruto looked up to the starry sky and closed his eyes with a smile on his face. The goddess was right beside him as she also smiled and brought him into a hug. The trip back home was fairly uneventful as they skipped across the trees on their way straight to Konoha. Once they reached the village and subsequently the Hokage tower just past midnight, Kakashi let the boy down, who woke up shortly afterwards. Naruto looked at him as he just pointed to the stairs leading to the Hokage office. Naruto nodded and followed the two Anbu up the stairs and into the office. But before they could reach there, the silver-haired Anbu put a hand into his pocket and pulled out a plain silver locket and handed it to the boy. Naruto looked at it incuriously before opening it and saw the photo of a rather chubby man in his 30s and a young emerald-haired girl. Naruto widened his eyes and snapped his head at Kakashi, who was already walking again. The blonde smiled and pocketed the accessory before following the two again. Reporting the mission as a success, Hokage-sama. The dog mask Anbu stated to their village leader. The Hokage nodded and asked for the details. So they spent the next few minutes reporting the details and the actions they took with regards to the mission, also giving him the scrolls containing the cave's treasures. The old Hokage glanced at the boy at the mention of the chakra trail, but both of them didn't say anything. In the end, the Hokage simply nodded and gave them an acknowledgement document. You have indeed successfully completed the given A rank mission. You may receive your payment by presenting that document at the mission counter below. Though I suggest that you do so tomorrow. It would be rude to wake someone up just to ask for money. He said while the two Anbu chuckled somewhat formally. You may avail the bounty on Kurikage Hadashi at your own leisure. For now, you are dismissed. The two of them bowed to the Hokage, then walked towards the door. They took one last glance at the blonde boy who wished them a good night as they nodded in reply and went out. But the silver-haired Anbu stared at the Hokage from the door, who nodded and gestured his hands in a way that said to come the next day. The Hokage then turned to the boy, who shook his head slightly and quickly turned his eyes to 3 positions in the room. The older man took the hint and gestured his personal Anbu to leave the room, which they did as he quickly activated the privacy seal. Naruto then told his Jai-chan his version of the mission, which basically meant retelling all the events of the entire day. Him discovering about the kidnapping, taking his sister's place, leaving the chakra trail, going to the bandit hideout, facing the missing nin, the story about his sister's past, all the way until the part where Kakashi and Itachi had arrived, not leaving out a single detail. Yes, Naruto-kun. I have heard of that lab explosion incident as well. I will ask the best doctors in Konoha to check up on her, though I have a feeling that the damage is already done. Still, I congratulate you on a job well done, Naruto-kun. You were quite a bit reckless in your endeavor, but still did a good job. I will reward you with a B rank mission payment for your services unofficially. You may come and collect it tomorrow from me personally. He said while Naruto nodded, with a grin on his face. Also Naruto-kun, I have a question for you. Keep in mind that this is only a question. He said in a serious tone, to which Naruto nodded after hearing about and myself seeing some of your abilities. What would you say if I were to offer you a chance to take the genin test and let you become a genin right now? I'd refuse it immediately. Naruto replied instantly with no hesitation. The old Hokage blinked at the boy, who then continued, there are 3 reasons that I say this. 1. If I decide to take you up on that offer, the idiots from the council would eat your head over your decision. He said as the Hokage rubbed his temples in irritation at the very thought. 2. If I wait and become a genin the usual way, I'd have more time to train and make myself stronger before going out into that world. In other words, I'd be safer. He said, and the Hokage nodded again, pleased with his forethought. 3. I want to spend more time with my friends while I'm still young. He said as both his and his Jai-chan's face softened. The Hokage nodded and smiled, very pleased with his surrogate grandson's thoughts. He got up and went around the desk. He grabbed Naruto into a small hug, which the boy returned with full force. After releasing each other, Hiruzen gave the boy a piece of information. "You better go home now, Naruto-kun. I am sure that your sister is worried sick about you. I paid her a visit earlier and told her you'd come home soon. I believe it is best if you do just that." He told the boy, who instantly perked up and looked at the wall clock, which showed midnight. He hurriedly said his goodbyes and good nights and ran out of the office, disabling the privacy barrier in the process. The Hokage watched the boy go, then sighed and went out himself. He locked the door and activated the security seals before leaving. "Nico, cat," the Hokage called out suddenly as an Anbu with a cat mask and long silky purple hair appeared. She seemed to be about 11 to 12 years old and was rather curvaceous as well. Despite being so young, she had the body of a person 2 or 3 years older. "Hokage-sama, make sure Naruto-kun gets home safely," he said and walked off. Nico or Yuzuki Ikga's face softened behind her mask as she headed out onto the rooftops to secretly ensure the boy's safe arrival to his home. Naruto reached the closed vegetable shop and made his way up the stairs. He stood in front of the door and took a deep breath. He prepared himself and was tackled to the ground in a bone-crushing hug. "Naruto-kun. You're back. You're really back," Yui exclaimed while hugging the life out of Naruto. "Why yeah Yui-nichan. I'm back. Now could you please stop hugging me to death?" he managed to say as she loosened her grip but didn't bother letting go. Ikga looked at the scene and couldn't help but smile before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. "I'm sorry. I was scared that you were gone, that you abandoned me too, Naruto-kun," she said softly. The boy noticed her altered use of his name but decided to not comment on it at the moment. Naruto shook his head and hugged her back before getting her to stand up, but she still wouldn't let go of him but was now hugging him from behind. "I'd never do that, Nichan. Never ever. On that note, your father didn't do that either," he said as she looked at him in shock. Naruto sighed and led her inside the house to the living room where they sat on the couch, with Yui still holding him on her lap. Naruto then proceeded to recite to her a very dumbed-down version of his day's activities. Mainly, he told her about her ability, her past and her father. Needless to say, she was shocked beyond belief and supremely angry towards her biological parents. Naruto calmed her down, then finally told her the bandit leader's final words. At the end of it all, she was sobbing hard, but Naruto took out and handed to her the locket that Kakashi gave him. Yui widened her eyes and instantly snatched from him and opened it. She sobbed even harder while apologizing to her dead father for ever doubting him as she hugged the locket in her hands. While that was going on, the locket that Yui was wearing from the morning glowed briefly. In a while, Yui's sobs turned into sniffles as they both went to bed. Both of them had enough for the day, and all they wanted was a good night of sleep. Yui had placed her father's locket on the table in front of a small framed photo of him. As they both went to bed, neither of them noticed the slight glow from the locket on the table. If one were to observe both the lockets now, they would find that the people in the photo were smiling even happier than before. 10 months. That is the time that has passed since the incident involving Yui and Naruto. Naruto's edited story of him innocently trying to make sure his sister would be safe had spread across the village. The residents of their neighborhood, Aka the market district, praised the young boy for his actions, though most of them scolded him for doing so. The 5-year-old recklessly hitching a ride on a criminal caravan to prevent future incidents is by all means stupid, no matter the reasoning. Though in Naruto's opinion, he thought that he acted a little too quickly, not stupidly. One does not simply classify the actions of a 40-year-old war hero as simply stupid, but instead as poorly planned. Too bad no one knows he's mentally that old. Because of this rumor, his reputation in the village as a whole improved a little. His neighborhood residents now treated Naruto as the little brother idol who cares very much for his sister. And hence, they're friendly with him. With the other villagers, there wasn't too much difference. There were of course a few occasional curious and even respectful glances at him, but the majority still either glared at him or remained apathetic. The unspoken agreement between the adult villagers was that they would make sure the rumors of Naruto's actions don't spread to the younger generation. While a very few rare families wanted their children to still not like him, most of them didn't want their children to develop any hero complexes. That would be quite troublesome to put up with, and Naruto himself was thankful for that unspoken agreement. And since the rumors hadn't spread to the kids, Naruto's friends all treated him as usual. On that matter, Naruto's group had grown to consist of all members of the original Rookie 9 in his past life. The former Genin group consisted of the members of Team 7, Team 8 and Team 10 in its heyday. Since Naruto had first befriended the Inoshikacho trio and Sakura, he only needed to find Kiba, Shino, Hinata and finally Sasuke. Kiba, Shino and Hinata were all rather easy to find and induct into his little group. Though Hinata was a strange case at the time. Naruto had found the wide-eyed girl being bullied by the same 3 damn kids who were doing the same to Sakura a few months ago. Since he wanted to polish his old prank skills, he diligently took the time to get rid of them the hard way. A quick application of Kage Bunshin and Henge helped contribute to the appearance of the famed bear panda from his time. Of course the so-called Ninja Academy students had gone white when the beast roared right by their ears. That day, the people around Konoha watched as a strange beast chased 3 kids around the village before disappearing mysteriously. When Naruto tried to get to know the girl though, he completely froze as he heard Hinata call him Niacin. He tried to get her to stop, but to no avail. But a small talk with his laughing inner goddess suddenly stopped that strange phenomenon the next day. Said talk consisted of the goddess being chased around the mindscape by a giant fox with a blonde sitting on its head, waving a stick around while cackling madly. After solving that little problem, Naruto spent the next 3 months training himself into the ground. It got to the point that he was visibly tired every time he came to the park to spend time with his friends, which was a big deal since he was the very definition of a ball of energy. Naruto had 2 reasons for his sudden dedication to extreme training. One was that he realized that he was subconsciously taking it easy the past few days before meeting Hadashi. He cursed himself for letting that happen and growing soft due to the many years of peace he spent as an adult. Ever since then, he did not take it easy in any way imaginable. The second reason was that he wanted to be satisfyingly strong for his first meeting with Sasuke. Naruto knew that he wouldn't need it that much since he vaguely remembered that Sasuke didn't have a stick in his ass until after the Uchiha massacre. Before that tragic event, Sasuke used to be a normal cheerful boy kind of. So, Naruto went to meet his best friend after his training was done. Flashback 5 months ago, it was nearing the start of summer and hot days were beginning to become normal in Konoha. At the moment, Naruto was traversing through the village with a specific destination in mind. The blonde had remembered that prior to the infamous massacre of the Uchiha clan, Sasuke was always lonely since his father used to focus on his prodigious brother Itachi. Sasuke would usually come to the lake in the village and just sit there by himself having nothing to do. With that bit of knowledge, the lake was where Naruto was going at the moment. And sure enough, he was there. By the time Naruto reached the lake in the late afternoon, he saw a raven-haired boy wearing a black high-collar shirt and white shorts sitting at the edge of the pier swinging his legs while watching the calm waters. That was him, Uchiha Sasuke. The younger brother of the clan murderer Itachi and the second most powerful ninja in the world by the age of 30. He used to be equal in power with the 7th Hokage, but was surpassed when Naruto decided to pick up heavy training once more after the events with Momoshiki. Naruto walked down silently and stared at the raven-haired boy's back. The blonde silently walked towards the shore and picked up a dozen smooth stones. He came back holding the stones in his hands, then abruptly seated himself about a foot away beside Sasuke. The black-eyed boy twitched in surprise and turned to the new arrival beside him. The blue-eyed boy gave him a grin and placed the stones between the two of them in a heap. The lad watched curiously as the blonde picked up one of the stones and threw them towards the lake. The stone skipped 2 times on the water before it sank into it. Naruto placed his fists on his hips and turned to the other boy, giving off an aura which practically just exuded the thought try and beat that. Not one to turn down a challenge, the other boy smirked and picked up a stone, throwing it into the lake. Though unfortunately for him, the stone only skipped once before sinking into the lake. The boy looked shocked and turned to the blonde who grew an even longer proverbial long nose. He grit his teeth and tossed another stone, which skipped 4 times before sinking. At that, both of the boys gaped and looked at each other before the raven-haired boy grew his own long nose. The blonde smirked before continuing their impromptu stone-skipping fight. When they ran out of stones, both of them jumped off the pier and gathered more before continuing. After half an hour of vigorous stone tossing, both of them tied at 9 skips and agreed to end their battle. The dark-eyed boy had his hands on his knees and panting, while the blonde was standing straight with only a little faster breathing. After both calmed down, the blonde extended a hand to the other boy. "My name's Uzumaki Naruto," he said with a grin. The other boy took his hand and gave him a small smile, which almost caught Naruto off guard since he hadn't really seen his best friend smile genuinely from his heart. "I'm Uchiha Sasuke." Naruto nodded and the both spent a small amount of time getting to know each other, sitting on the pier idly swinging their legs. Thanks to Sasuke's depression because of his father not paying him any attention, he was pretty quick to tell Naruto about that and why he always spent his time at the lake. Naruto learned that Sasuke didn't have any friends his age and the people he did know were adults who were always busy. At the end of that, Naruto invited him to come to his usual park the next day, to which Sasuke gleefully agreed. After all was said and done, both of them got up when they saw that it was getting dark. "So I'll see you tomorrow at the park, yeah?" "Of course," the Uchiha boy said and started to jog away back home. He turned back, while going and waved to the blonde, "See you tomorrow Naruto." Naruto waved back at him, "You too." "Bye Sasuke," he shouted as the other boy went out of sight. Naruto brought his arm down while lowering his head and smiling. The Bijkin inside him snorted at his thoughts. "You still call him that, huh? I thought you'd have gotten over it by now." "Shut up, furball. Don't ruin the beautiful moment. I was getting nostalgic over here." Kurama gained a tick mark on his head and growled lowly, "And it seems you haven't gotten over that either." Maybe I should go back to calling you puny human again. How about it? Okay. Sorry Kurama. But you know what I mean. It's been a long time since I've seen my best friend, after all. Even before I came here, he hadn't returned to the village for a few years. The orange fox huffed and sat down before going back to sleep. Though Naruto could almost feel that the fox had a smirk on his face. So he just smirked in reply. The goddess just watched the interaction between the human and the Bijk with open interest. This is one of the reasons that she liked this particular boy man. Naruto was one of the purest souls she knew, and he was even able to turn a creature of hatred like Kurama into his most trusted comrade. The two had a bond that surpassed even the ones that other Jinchuriki had with their own Bijk. He has power that no one else has, yet he doesn't abuse it. He is always selfless and puts his friends' opinions first and foremost. Pago-kun would be so proud. Oh wait, he was proud. Naruto-kun already met him. The goddess chuckled happily, which seemed to confuse Naruto. What happened, Kami-chan? The beautiful violet-haired goddess shook her head at her host's concerns. It's nothing, Naruto-kun. Nothing at all. Naruto blinked at her behavior, then just shrugged and walked back to his own home. The day after, Sasuke had come to the park along with Naruto, who introduced him to everyone. He noticed that all of them looked at the blonde in awe. Though he didn't understand immediately, he quickly realized that they were awed because their newest friend was an Uchiha and was also the son of the clan head. Being one of the strongest clans in the village counts for something after all, even though they blissfully forgot that they were clan heirs as well. Naruto had a worry when he brought Sasuke to his friends. In particular, he was worried about the girls. He was pretty sure Hinata wouldn't care that much, but what concerned him were Ino and Sakura. He was worried that they might get infatuated by Sasuke and things might turn out like before, with the two of them becoming some kind of rivals and always fighting with each other. The boys didn't act much different with Sasuke and Hinata greeted him normally. Though Naruto was surprised and relieved that Ino did the same as well. She just introduced herself casually without even blinking. When it was Sakura's turn, she just looked at Sasuke, then at Naruto, then back to Sasuke. She looked between the two a few times before fainting and falling unconscious. Naruto had to stifle a laugh when she fainted and the others were panicking as to what happened. But one look at Sasuke stopped his laughter and his face became one of shock. Sasuke was trying and failing horribly to suppress a blush when he saw Sakura. After she had woken up, the two were talking to each other in whispers with both of them having red cheeks. Naruto saw that the pink-haired girl was constantly glancing towards himself as well. Contrary to popular belief, Naruto was not an idiot. At least not now that he's mentally 40 years old and well experienced in almost everything, including love. He realized that Sakura was having doubts and was trying to decide between him and Sasuke. Naruto understood her thoughts and he decided to just give her some time to find the answer herself. And do not jump to conclusions about anything please. If you have doubts, wait for future chapters. Flashback end. Naruto also tried to find the three members of Team 8. He did find Tenten, who coincidentally happened to be the daughter of the ninja shop owner, Shigeru. Though he had befriended her, she was just too damn infatuated with her glorified teddy bears to even notice his presence most of the time. In case you didn't understand that, I was talking about the weapons in the store. He bumped into Neji one day on the street, but all thoughts of getting to know him were immediately squashed when he heard the wide-eyed boy utter the word fate repeatedly. And within the next few seconds, the blonde was nowhere to be seen anywhere near there. That problem was one that Naruto planned to solve some other time. Rock Lee's situation was a lot more simpler. He was nowhere to be found, simple as that. Naruto idly concluded that the boy must be climbing some mountain with a boulder tied to his back. He'd find him once the academy started. Naruto was also pleased that some of the games that his group of friends play now revolve around imitating ninja. The blonde decided to subtly help them out by changing the rules, which made the game still look normal, but also doubled as very light training, physically and mentally. Though the other 8 kids never really understood why the blonde was just a little better than them at all the games. When they actually asked him about it, he already had his answer ready. Because he's awesome. Period. Back in the present, Naruto was sleeping peacefully in the bed in his house. As rays of light penetrated through the curtains and started to light up the room, Naruto groggily rubbed his eyes and yawned. For some reason, he had a really good feeling about today. He didn't know why either, he just felt good. Naruto slowly tried to sit up but saw that he couldn't. Looking down, he saw that he was being held onto by his emerald-haired sister, Yui. That was another thing. Naruto noticed at first that Yui was kind of nervous around him. She couldn't look at him in the eye while speaking and stuttered sometimes. But luckily enough, that stopped after a few days. She now treated him as a normal younger brother. Naruto was eternally thankful to whatever godlike being overseeing his life, that his relationship with her didn't go beyond that. It'd be beyond awkward if that did happen. She was still a little clingy though, but he didn't mind that. Naruto tried to pry Yui off of him, but to no avail. Being a ninja for a very long time, it didn't take long for his mind to kickstart itself in the mornings. A good ninja would be alert even while asleep. So with his mind at full focus, he looked at his sister's face. She was making a very faint snoring sound while having a divinely calm face. He smiled at her before he moved his hand and poked her cheek a few times. "Wake up, Nichin. It's morning." Yui groaned and stirred while her eyes fluttered open and immediately saw the amused smile on her younger brother's face. She huffed slightly and let go of him before sitting up herself and stretching her arms above her head. Done with that, she turned to the young blonde and quickly glomped him from his side in a hug. Definitely a little clingy. "Good morning, Naru-kun." Naruto shook his head with a smile, while doing so induced a giggle from his sister since her face was right on top of his spiky hair and was tickling her face. Eventually, the both of them let go and went around doing their own thing. With breakfast finished, both of them set off to their respective works, Naruto's training and Yui's shopkeeping.